Chapter 868. The war between the Witches of Destiny and the Winter Witches was both bizarre and absurd. The difference in strength between the two sides was so great, but their performance on the battlefield showed another extreme. The witches and apprentices of the Destiny line never cared about their territories and resource points being attacked. Once they realized that their strength was not superior, they would immediately retreat. If the other party insisted on pursuing them, they would even leave elemental puppets behind to give themselves a chance to leave the battlefield. However, once the Destiny line gained the upper hand, the witches and apprentices could use the cheap elemental puppets to form a suicide squad and charge in the most dangerous places on the battlefield. As for the witches, they would hide in a safe place in the rear and attack the enemy with instant magic wands or witchcraft scrolls. In this way, the casualties of the Destiny line were the lowest on most of the battlefields. The Winter Witches once made a statistic and found that the ratio of casualties between the Winter line and the Destiny line had reached an astonishing 11:1. It had been less than 2 months since the start of the war between the two witches. Embark, who was usually in charge of the Valley of Ice and Snow, finally lost her cool and rushed out of the station with a group of ice and snow guards. Strangely enough, as soon as the Tier 3 witches appeared, the entire battlefield was immediately turned around. All the Destiny witches and apprentices were ordered to retreat to the Tower of Destiny in the Dragonbone Wilderness. Almost all the Crimson family's Tier 2 witches could stay in the periphery to hold back the Winter Witches. The Winter Witches tried all kinds of ways to encircle and suppress these powerful Tier 2 witches, but unfortunately, the results were minimal. Although they injured the Tier 2 Dragonoid and forced back the Goblin Ripper controlled by Tygol, one of their own Tier 2 witches was ambushed and taken away by Mary. All in all, the Winter Witches had lost so badly that they did not even have their underwear left. Seemingly unable to accept such a reality, Embark was so angry that she personally went to the battlefield, intending to give the other party a ruthless blow. Unfortunately, Dragonoid Zacha, Tygol, and Mary, who fought together all year round, never met her, a Tier 3 witch. As long as she was on the battlefield, the Crimson Sorcerers would never fight head-on. Instead, they would scatter and hide. However, as soon as they discovered a Tier 2 witch on the Winter Witch's side, Mary would lead a group of Tier 2 vampires and charge at them. The Winter Witch's ice witchcraft was powerful in both offense and defense. But in the face of multiple vampires' attacks, it was difficult for her to resist. Not to mention the fact that Mary, the Blood Queen who was about to reach the peak of Tier 2, was hidden among this group of vampires. Mary's attack power was obviously on the weaker side. Even the Blood Claw with blood energy was only 180 degrees of attack power. However, he was unable to block Mary's lightning-fast attacks, exchanging speed for damage. Mary's 3 Blood Shadow Claw attacks stacked together was also very shocking. Moreover, after fusing with the foreign runes, Mary's normal attacks also had the corrosive properties of blood energy and the defense ignore shadow damage. Although these two magic effects were not fatal, they were extremely difficult to deal with. Even if the Winter Witches wrapped themselves in a hard ice shell, it was difficult to resist the penetration of the two magic effects. Apart from the Tier 3 witch leader Morgana, the other Winter Witches would not be able to fight or escape if they encountered Mary. No matter how much they cried, it was difficult for them to escape the vampire's sneak attacks. Silent Swamp. In the periphery of the Dragonbone Wilderness, the Silent Swamp could be regarded as a moderately dangerous place with lakes and swamps rarely seen in the vast plains. Shrouded in a thick, damp fog, large and small pools and muddy ponds could be seen everywhere. Many places seemed to be green grass, but if one really stepped on it, one would immediately fall into a swamp composed of silt and stinky water. Many aquatic monsters were also densely distributed throughout the Silent Swamp. Once an outsider broke in, they would quietly lurk in the mud and follow closely. When the other party was trapped in the silt swamp and unable to escape, they would pounce on the enemy like a ferocious beast, using their sharp claws and teeth to tear the warm flesh from the enemy's body, taking the opportunity to feast on it. It was precisely because of the gloominess and danger here that almost no merchants dared to pass through the silent swamp. But today, a group of witches descended from the sky and broke the peace here. Morgana jumped down from a snow eagle that was more than 3 meters tall. Her feet stepped on the soft, muddy ground, and she could not help but frown deeply as she inhaled the putrid stench of decay. "Are you sure they're inside?" Morgana asked the deputy leader, Thero, who was next to her. Thero was a Tier 2 witch with a beautiful figure and face, but her expression was so cold that she did not look like a living person. It was as if an ice beauty had come back to life. Hearing this, she first cast a spell to sense for a while, then nodded solemnly and said, "The other party is still in the swamp." When she injured Zevelina, she deliberately hung a layer of winter's chill on her. The other party won't be able to melt away that chill so easily. Morgana also closed her eyes to sense for a while. Sure enough, a familiar chill went straight to the depths of the swamp and was slowly spreading. "Then hurry up and do it. Don't let that bitch Mary escape from our hands again. Thero, bring some people to this end and find her. I'll go to the other end and block her path of retreat. We must capture this damned Blood Queen alive today." After saying this, Morgana took a step forward, and her entire body quickly condensed into a huge ice sculpture. In the next second, the ice sculpture shattered and disintegrated, turning into sparkling ice shards all over the ground. Morgana, who was hiding in the ice sculpture, had disappeared without a trace. "Did you hear the leader's words?" Thero ordered with a cold expression. "The two of you form groups of 2 and spread out. Find out Mary for me. With the leader here this time, I'll see if that group of vampires still dare to show up. Let's go." In this large-scale attack, a total of 8 winter witches were dispatched. Other than Morgana, who was Tier 3, and Thero, who was Tier 2, the other 6 winter witches were also Tier 2. At this moment, hearing the order, the witches bowed and responded. One by one, they used their unique skills and quickly rushed into the silent swamp. This was a small, isolated island in the depths of the swamp. The surroundings were filled with mud and smelly water that sank with a single step. Only on the isolated island, with a radius of 100 meters, was there a piece of solid land for one to stand on. At this moment, Mary was on the isolated island. She stood at the edge of the isolated island, straightened her body, and looked in the direction where she came from. The fog here was thick and heavy, and one could not see far at all. Moreover, mud, smelly water, shrubs, thorns, and eerie ghost trees could be seen everywhere. There were simply too many places for one to hide. Moreover, there seemed to be something strange in the silent swamp. Even spiritual perception could not penetrate the layer of strange mist that was like a thin veil. Therefore, it was extremely difficult to find a person hiding at a distance of less than 30 meters. You can't escape. A tightly bound and bloodstained witch lay at Mary's feet. She gritted her teeth and said, "With the cold of winter on your body, our people can clearly smell it from 10 miles away. Don't even think of escaping back to Dragonbone Waste today." "Escape? Why should I escape?" Mary's expression did not change, and she smiled faintly. "Our leader has already caught up. Do you think you can contend against a grade 3 witch?" "You're right. Morgana is already here. However, she has already circled to the back of the silent swamp and wants to block my path of retreat. There are no longer any grade 3 witches on the battlefield. What are you trying to do?" Seeing that the other party was being chased, she did not panic at all. Instead, she knew everything that was happening in the periphery of the silent swamp like the back of her hand. This made the winter witch, Zevelina, feel that something was wrong. Could it be, unfortunately, she did not have the chance to think too much. Mary raised her foot and kicked her into the quagmire in front of her. "Bastard! Zevelina only had time to curse before she sank into the muddy water with a gurgling sound. Visible to the naked eye, a few clear lines of water in the quagmire quickly rushed towards the place where she had sunk. Even for rank 2, which was injured and tied up, it would be impossible for the other party to kill her. However, It was inevitable that he would suffer some hardships. After Mary was done, she leaped up without hesitation. The blood-red bat wings on her back flapped, and she turned into a crimson-red line, pouncing in the direction she had come from. On the right side of her waist, a blue ice sword began to disappear at a speed visible to the naked eye under the impact of the ferocious blood energy. Somewhere in the silent swamp, Li'er gently floated 10 meters above the silt swamp. As she flew forward, she constantly scanned her surroundings. The silt swamp was actually not static, but was flowing slowly in a certain direction. However, there was a layer of soft grass floating above the silt, which gave people the false impression that it was motionless. There were obviously many wild monsters within the silt. There were silt monsters, drowned zombies, old hag. No matter which one it was, they could not escape Li'er's mental perception. Mary had always been known for being cunning and cruel. The winter witches were almost no match for her in a one-on-one fight. But at this moment, Li'er had her companions half a mile away on both sides, which made her feel a little more at ease. No matter how fierce Mary is, I should be able to hold her off a few times. As long as I can hold her back a few times, the so-called Blood Queen will not be able to escape once the surrounding companions surround her. In this way, I can capture the enemy without alerting the leader, and it can be considered as a great contribution to the family. After returning, the reward will definitely be satisfactory. Therefore, the winter witches searched in a loose formation in order to lure that fellow out as soon as possible. Just as Li'er was slowly moving forward, she suddenly sensed the cold aura of winter not far in front of her. The other party was rushing towards her at high speed, like an arrow released from a bow. Damn it, it's that Mary. Chapter 869. The battle began in an instant. The mist 30 meters in front of her split to the left and right, and a blood-red figure rushed to the front of which Lil at lightning speed. The ice shield that was erected in an instant was just in time to block the terrifying bloody hand that was stabbing towards him. Taking advantage of the moment when the opponent's body was suddenly slowed by a layer of frost on the ice shield, Lil waved the magic wand in her hand. A series of ice spears and snow swords mixed with cold wind swept the opponent into the air. Dense wounds immediately appeared on the opponent's slender body, but before the blood could flow out, these wounds were frozen by the rapidly cooling low temperature. Thus, even though she was covered in wounds, there was almost no blood on the scene. No, Mary couldn't be so weak. Lil, who instantly understood, frowned. She immediately focused her mind and planned to pass the news to her companions who had heard the news and rushed over to help. But at this time, the bloody figure forcibly blew away the ice and snow entangling him, and once again rushed towards Lil. Damn it, this is the enemy's plan. Although she understood, facing an opponent of the same rank who was determined to fight to the death, Lil could not divert her attention to warn her companions. Two beautiful figures, one red and one white, instantly clashed together, stirring up the swamp and turning it upside down. After receiving the warning of her attack, the witch companions scattered around Lil quickly approached her, while warning their companions at the same time. Ciro, who was also at the peak of grade 2, took the lead and rushed to the front. In this way, the two witches who were originally at the edge of the search formation were left behind. Lara was such an unlucky person. She was originally at the rightmost end of the fan-shaped search area. When layers of warning messages were passed to her, the two companions on her left had already rushed to the battlefield. When she received the alarm of being attacked, she stopped and prepared to rush to the rescue. But she had already opened up a distance of nearly 2 miles from her companions. If it was in normal times, this 2 miles of space was nothing at all. If she flew at full speed, she would only need 30 to 40 seconds to meet up with her companions. But in the eyes of those who were observant, this 2 miles was already the distance between life and death. Just as she was about to turn around and rush to the battlefield, 5 blood shadows flew out from the muddy swamp she was in. 2 of them emerged from the stinking sludge. One flew up from the withered ghost tree not far away, and the other 2 swooped down from the clouds, almost in an instant, they surrounded Lara, who was alone. Naturally, the two Blood Knights, Soros and Windsoul, were the ones who weren't obsessed with cleanliness and were willing to hide in the mud. As soon as they appeared, they exploded the mud and smelly water all over their bodies. They waved two powerful blood-colored sword energies at the austere witch 30 meters away. The other three blood elves let out ghostly cries as they pounced towards Lara's side, blocking off any space for her to escape and dodge. Damn it, Lara did not even have the time to curse the vampires for their treachery. She quickly conjured up an ice shield while waving her frost aura to freeze the blood elves who were pouncing on her in place. These blood elves were of the same rank as her, so their magic resistance was astonishingly high. Lara's ice witchcraft could barely freeze them in place for half a second, and with this half a second, it was enough for her to dodge left and right amidst the many attacks, avoiding the danger of being focused on. But she was facing 5 Grade 2 vampires after all. If they fought one-on-one, perhaps none of them would be a match for her. But the 5 of them swarmed forward, and each of them did not care about their own safety, not caring about the injuries they suffered. This made Lara's situation extremely thrilling in an instant. Damn it, it's been more than 10 seconds. Have my companions become blind and deaf? Can't they hear or see the battle that broke out here? While fighting with all her might, Lara could not help but look in the direction of her companions. Of course, her companions were not stupid. When they were halfway there, the sudden burst of energy behind them made them understand the other party's plan. But when they turned around and wanted to turn back to help, Mary flapped her blood-colored bat wings, turned into a red lightning, and suddenly rushed over, blocking the way of the 2 winter witches with her own strength. Although the 2 winter witches were powerful, it was wishful thinking to think that they could take down the Blood Queen, who was as swift as the wind, in just a minute or two. The 2 of them fought together for a full 70 seconds. Before the other witches arrived, Mary screamed and rushed out of the battlefield, withstanding the attacks of the 2 witches. She disappeared into the depths of the silt swamp in a flash. The 2 winter witches were stunned at first, and then they realized that the 2 battlefields on the left and right were silent, as if the winner had been decided. Just as they were in a dilemma and did not know which side to go, Deputy Leader Thero flew over with the other 3 witches, carrying a blood-stained and frozen blood elf in her hand. Fortunately, I finally caught one of the other party's captives. Just as this thought emerged in the minds of the 2 witches, they immediately thought of Lara, who was alone at the back, and their faces instantly turned pale again. 1 for 1, exchanging a blood elf for one of our witches? On the surface, the other party did not seem to be an advantage, but when it really happened, it still made the many winter witches frown. These blood elves were monsters that were forcibly transformed by the other party using evil witchcraft, and they were not elegant. On the other hand, the winter witches on the other side were nurtured bit by bit at a huge cost. Seriously speaking, the 2 sides were not on the same level at all, and there was no comparison. If it was such a 1-for-1 exchange, the winter witches would definitely suffer. Kill her, a witch with a cold expression said sternly. Deputy Leader Thero shook her head silently. We can't kill her, a witch next to her explained gloomily. If we kill her, we will give them an excuse to kill our sisters. Don't forget that 2 of our companions have fallen into their hands. Deputy Leader Thero narrowed her eyes, scanned the evil and strange area, and said coldly, I've been to this silent swamp before, and there was no such strange fog. It seems that this is a battlefield that they set up in advance. We can only blame ourselves for being too careless and stepping into their home ground too easily. Then, should we continue to search next? Search, Deputy Leader Thero said coldly. I've informed the leader she is moving towards us from the other side. If those vampires still want to play a second game, I'll make them all stay. After saying that, the winter witches nodded in unison, dispersed again, and continued to search slowly forward. But this time, the distance between them had been shortened to 200 meters. However, these winter witches did not know that at this moment, Above the thick fog of the silent swamp, there were 10 eyeball fighters slowly gliding in the sky. An interference spell formation had been set up in advance in the depths of the swamp fog, which caused most people's mental perception to have a huge deviation. However, the Crimson Sorcerers, who were prepared in advance, had buried special monitoring crystals everywhere in the swamp, and then transmitted the detected information to the eyeball fighters high above the swamp in a point-to-point manner. The eyeball fighters then transmitted the real-time, dynamic picture of the swamp to the vampires in charge of fighting. Using this method, a blood elf was used as bait to lure the witches into disarray. Then, Mary personally intercepted the witches and cut off the possible reinforcements that the lone witches might get. That was how they managed to capture a chilly winter witch in exchange for one. In this way, the captive in Mary's hands increased from 1 to 2. However, just as Mary and a few vampire subordinates gathered together to plan a new attack, the eyeball fighters sent back a piece of news that made them feel uneasy. Behind a silent swamp, a huge snowstorm was approaching quickly. Everywhere it passed, everything within a few miles was frozen, and even the spies that Mary and the others had planted in advance were cut off one by one. Needless to say, Morgana had lost her patience and began to enter the battlefield forcefully. You guys take the captives back first. I want to meet that Morgana. Facing a rank 3 witch who was close to going berserk, Mary was not willing to risk her life and lose all the things that she had won in the past. Therefore, under her command, the numerous vampires fished out the bruised and bruised Zevelina from the quagmire and wrapped up the bloodied and dispirited Lara. One by one, they turned into a huge blood-red bat, bypassing the destructive snowstorm, and sneaked back to the Dragonbone Waste. Entering the Dragonbone Waste was equivalent to entering the territory of the Witches of Destiny. Almost all the various monsters entrenched there were controlled and driven by the Tower of Destiny. If the Winter Witches dared to invade, the road from here to the Tower of Destiny would not be peaceful. However, Mary herself did not leave. Instead, she carefully and slowly sorted out the items and equipment on her body, using these actions to relax her body and mind bit by bit. There was no excitement about the upcoming battle with a rank 3 witch, nor was there any anxiety. Mary's heart was cold and calm, just like the unmoving core of a vampire. Vampires did not have a heartbeat. It was precisely because they had lost their ability to produce blood that the vampire race was forced to drink the blood of others to make up for the loss of their own blood. Although the heart no longer beat and had lost its original function, it was still one of the most important organs of a vampire's body. This was because most of their spiritual consciousness was stored in the core, which was the true carrier of their soul. If Grimm could fight a rank 3, which with his rank 2 body, why couldn't she? Chapter 870. Mary dashed across the swamp at a speed she had never seen before. Countless swamps and dead trees appeared in her field of vision before quickly disappearing behind her. The surrounding scenery became more and more blurry. All objects and colors became mottled and mixed together, becoming more and more difficult to distinguish. Even without the help of the bat wings on her back, Mary could still fly in the air. Mary dragged a long trail of bloody afterimages behind her. The tips of her feet lightly tapped on the soft and empty meadow, and with a little bit of buoyancy, she was able to pass through the swamp without any hindrance. At the end of her line of sight, a whirling snowstorm was wreaking havoc in the silent swamp. Everywhere it passed, the mud swamp was frozen, the shrubs and thorns were frozen, and even the ferocious monsters hiding in the mud dozens of meters below were frozen into ice sculptures by the extreme cold power. Soon, they lost their last trace of life. The snowstorm was also advancing at an extremely high speed. At the edge of the snowstorm where the cold wind wreaked havoc, one could vaguely see the slender and tall figure of a woman floating forward. And this terrible snowstorm was like a beautiful palace gauze draped over her vigorous figure. As she moved forward, white ice and blue frost covered every corner of the place. When they were still 200 meters apart, Mary felt that her body had become a little weak, as if she was about to be swept away by the snowstorm and lose control. In the distance, the destructive snowstorm was also sweeping towards her. Good, very good. I'll remember your name. Mary, I hope you won't regret your actions later. Go to hell. Morgana's cold voice, filled with hatred, could be heard from within the snowstorm. Immediately after, dozens of milky white frost balls shot out from the snowstorm. As they spun forward rapidly, they shot frost arrows in all directions. Mary's flying figure was immediately wrapped up by the frost arrows that were as dense as raindrops. Mary's mental strength was instantly raised to the extreme. The world in front of her was rapidly enlarging and slowing down. Crystalline frost arrows seemed to cover every corner of his field of vision. Some flew straight, some circled, some spun, some rolled. They collided with each other and pressed against each other, making the originally irregular rain of arrows even more unpredictable. In the face of such a rain of arrows, ordinary wizards could only raise their shields to resist. Mary, who was completely immersed in the battle, had long since forgotten fear and death. Her figure turned into a blood-red lightning, leisurely walking in the dense rain of arrows. Yes, when her spirit was raised to the extreme, when she unleashed her speed to the extreme, the combination of the two formed a strange scene that was almost slow motion. In Mary's eyes, the rolling snowstorm in the distance, the rapidly freezing swamp creatures, and the crazy rain of arrows that filled her field of vision were like images flipping frame by frame, allowing her to clearly see every detail and process power. What was power? The Tier 3, which Morgana's torrential storm, could already be considered a type of ultimate power of ice. However, in the eyes of a true powerhouse, their power was severely dispersed, and they could not condense the power of ice and snow into a single point to deal the greatest damage to the enemy. Even if it was a Tier 3 witch's icebound ball, Mary was still confident that she would be able to break through it without dying. This was probably a huge flaw that elemental witches could not avoid. Mary was like a powerful queen strolling in a still world, leisurely moving forward in the dense rain of frost arrows. For those places that were too dense for her to pass through, she stretched out a tender, white finger with a trace of light, red energy wrapped around it. With a light flick, the cold and hard ice arrows slightly adjusted the angle of their sharp edges, avoiding her body. In Mary's eyes, this was simply a frame by frame. But in the eyes of Morgana, who was not far away, there was a trace of a mysterious and strange feeling. Countless frost arrows filled the entire space, so densely packed that there was almost no gap between them. However, that damned Mary was like an elegant lady strolling in her garden, elegant and calm, without a trace of fear or panic. What was even worse was that she seemed to be possessed by the heavens, leisurely strolling in the rain of arrows without a single injury. Speaking of which, when the dense rain of arrows arrived in front of Mary, it was like a subject seeing a king, actually moving to the side on its own accord. Thus, the sky full of frost arrows could be seen, but all of them were close to Mary's body, temples, ears, neck, armpits, just right to miss her. After a round of dense icebound balls, Mary was actually unharmed. Other than a slightly flushed face, there were almost no other changes. Morgana was shocked. Mary was panting a little violently. That wonderful state just now only lasted for less than 5 fingers, and it allowed her to perfectly avoid a terrifying and destructive Tier 3 spell. If she could maintain that wonderful state for a long time, wouldn't she be able to easily defeat all her opponents? However, although the 5 fingers just now were short, it quickly exhausted all of her spiritual force. If not for the strong physique of a Tier 2 vampire supporting her, she was afraid that she would have collapsed to the ground with her brows tightly knitted. Damn it, that instantaneous burst of strength actually consumed so much spiritual force. Mary cursed as she quickly retreated. As she escaped from the Tier 3 witch's side, she also took out a blood crystal and threw it into her mouth. The blood crystal formed from the Tier 2 giant dragon's blood was quickly converted into a copious amount of blood energy in her body, and it also allowed her spiritual sea to slowly recover and rise. Not far away, Morgana, who was stunned by Mary's shocking performance, finally noticed her abnormality. She instantly understood that Mary must have used some kind of secret technique that stimulated her potential, which allowed her to avoid her witchcraft without suffering any accidental injuries. However, this secret technique seemed to have a shocking side effect, and with just a few fingers, it had drained her spiritual force. From this, it seemed that Mary was nothing to worry about. After thinking this through, Morgana was no longer surprised by Mary's performance. She waved her hands continuously, and a large cloud of cold air enveloped Mary like a cloud. With Morgana's attainments in ice witchcraft, as long as Mary was enveloped by the cold air, she would instantly be frozen into a human-shaped ice sculpture. When that time came, it would be up to the Tier 3 which to decide whether to kill or dismember her. Mary quickly retreated, and the cloud of cold air chased closely behind her. The front of the cold wave was only half a meter away from the tip of Mary's bat wings. Left without a choice, Mary could only raise her head and let out an ear-piercing scream, and the violent blood energy instantly spread around her body. With the support of this blood energy, Mary's flying speed instantly increased by nearly half, and she gradually increased the distance between her and the cold wave behind her. Although Morgana was proficient in ice witchcraft, she did not have any expertise in flying. Mary's full burst of strength instantly increased the distance between the two of them. Then, like a sharp arrow released from a bow, she pierced into the depths of the fog and disappeared without a trace. Morgana chased after her for another 2 kilometers before she unwillingly stopped. An ice storm surged and roared beside her, and the surroundings quickly turned into a world of ice and snow. Unfortunately, no matter how furious she could not change the fact that her opponent had already escaped. That damn Tier 2 vampire, although his battle power was not comparable to hers, with his terrifying speed, Morgana would not be able to do anything to him. So what if his witchcraft was strong? If she could not catch up to him, everything was just a bubble. For the first time, Morgana felt a little regret. Perhaps she should have put more effort into speed in the past. Almost no one knew about this short encounter that happened in the depths of the Silent Swamp. Although Mary had exhausted her spiritual force, and her body was slightly damaged due to the full burst of blood energy, her heart was surging, and she was so excited that she could not control herself. Because just now, at the most intense moment of the battle, she suddenly saw clearly the path of her future development. This fighting style was the most suitable for her, and it was also incomparably powerful. Therefore, Mary did not stop, and her whole body turned into a line of blood, traversing hundreds of kilometers in a straight line, directly returning to the Tower of Fate. At this moment, Mary was suddenly filled with incomparable confidence in advancing to Tier 3. The Tower of Fate. Alice stood alone on the astrological platform at the top, silently gazing into the distance. From her position, it was naturally impossible for her to see everything that happened in the silent swamp 100 kilometers away. However, in front of her, a huge water mirror wall displayed the scene in the distance. The vast and resplendent power of the starlight was slowly dissipating, and Alice's lonely figure seemed faintly weak and swaying. The little elemental fairy, Helen, was angrily coiled around her, and could not help but angrily ask her questions. Why did you help her? Why did you help her? That fellow is your competitor. Why did you exhaust your own strength to help her? If it was me, I would curse her to lose control of her strength, and it would be best if she died in the hands of that Tier 3, which, seeing Helen's indignant expression, Alice, who had just passed the period of weakness, revealed a pale smile. Where did you learn all this from, little fellow? You're still young. You don't understand the meaning of companions. Once they started scheming against each other and deceiving each other, it was inevitable that this newly formed force would fall apart. Isn't it good to let the strength of companions become stronger and be able to protect us better? I can't win against you in an argument, but I still feel that I shouldn't help that Mary. She She keeps pestering that fellow. Helen's voice became softer and softer. That's my problem, isn't it? Alice smiled weakly. All right, stop fooling around. Quickly bring me to rest. Chapter 871. What was the difference between a level 3 and a level 2? If one were to analyze it in a simple manner, it would mean stronger strength, higher physique, faster speed, and even more terrifying mental strength. However, no sorcerer could improve their physical fitness in such a comprehensive way. They had to focus on something and give up something. Therefore, elemental sorcerers focused on mental strength, taking into account physique, and completely abandoning strength and agility. There were 3 types of anatomy refinery sorcerers. Some focused on strength, some focused on physique, and of course, there were those like Mary who focused on agility. As for bloodline sorcerers, it depended on what bloodline they inherited. If they inherited the berserk ape, their physique and strength would be greatly enhanced, and their agility would not be too bad. Only their mental strength was a little low. If they inherited the fire dragon bloodline, their overall physical fitness would be greatly enhanced. In particular, fire sorcery would be the best. However, this analysis was only the basic physical data of both sides, and it was not comprehensive enough. Don't forget, as a level 3 sorcerer, they could easily live for hundreds of years longer than a level 2 sorcerer. During these hundreds of years, they could use all effective methods and means to improve their basic strength and dig deeper into their potential to go further on the path of witchcraft. Therefore, as a level 3 winter witch, Imogena's physical fitness was not necessarily weak in addition to her high mental strength. Imogena, level 3 advanced. Profession identity. Elemental sorcerer, ice specialization. Basic physical data. Strength greater than 24, constitution greater than 21, agility greater than 16, spirit greater than 37. Profession skill. Icy bloodline. Just from her basic physical fitness, it could be seen that she was a level 3 elemental witch with a weak body, but her constitution and strength both exceeded 20 points. This also meant that she had a strong physique that was not inferior to a level 2 anatomy refinery sorcerer. In this way, whether it was in terms of resistance or recovery after physical injury, she could be comparable to a level 2 anatomy refinery sorcerer. Perhaps the only difference between her and a level 2 anatomy refinery sorcerer was that she did not have the physical instincts and melee combat methods that had been tempered. She might not be able to win against a rank 2 anatomy refinery sorcerer in close combat if she abandoned her sorcery, but her high physical and elemental resistance was already on par with her opponent. With the addition of the rank 3 spells, Morgana could easily fight a rank 2 anatomy refinery sorcerer for 100 rounds without being at a disadvantage if she swung the big wooden mallet. 16 points of agility meant that Morgana's running or movement speed was almost the same as Mary's at Tier 1. This speed might be a little slow for Mary, who now had 29 points of agility, but it was more than enough for most wizard battles. To be honest, if it wasn't for the fact that Imogen coveted 15 points of agility, which increased the speed of her spell casting, she wouldn't have been willing to invest her time and resources into this branch that had the least impact on her combat ability. As for spiritual force, it was closely related to the strength of the spell, the duration of the spell's effects, the probability of triggering the spell's effects, and so on. With Imogena's 37 points of spiritual power, even after deducting the bonuses from all the equipment and tools, a frost arrow could reach 370 degrees of witchcraft power. As for a rank 2 elemental sorcerer, a rank 2 ice shield would only have a defense of 350 degrees. This also meant that any rank 2 sorcerer, even if they had all their defenses, would be as fragile as a piece of paper in front of Imogena. With just a few simple instant cast rank 3 spells, Imogena could easily pierce the eggshell outside the opponent's body and turn them into an ice sculpture. As for Imogena, with the physical and magical resistance of a rank 3, which, in addition to the support of rank 3 spells, her basic defense could reach 600 to 700 degrees. This also meant that when fighting against a rank 2 elemental sorcerer, Even if Mo Gunna did not fight back and just poured her wizard power into the ice shield, she could still render the opponent helpless and immovable. However, all of this did not take into account Mo Gunna's sorcery ability. One had to know that Mo Gunna was the leader of the Winter Witches with the icy bloodline. The ice sorcery that she mastered, whether it was the strength of the spell, the range of the spell, or the effect of the spell, was far above that of ordinary Winter Witches. Once the icy bloodline was activated, all of Mo Gunna's ice sorcery would lose its cooldown time. At that time, she would probably be able to turn the area within a radius of 5 kilometers into a world of ice within half a minute, with no signs of life remaining. The power of the chilly austere witches was famous even in ancient times. As for Mo Gunna's counterpart, Mary, she was a vampire sorcerer who was close to the peak of rank 2. She walked the bloodline route. Mary, peak of rank 2. Profession identity, bloodline sorcerer vampire. Basic stats, strength 15, constitution 17, agility 29, spirit 18. Profession skill, embrace from the basic combat power. It could be seen that the gap between the rank 2 Mary and the rank 3 Mo Gunna was simply too big. The two were not on the same level at all. Of course, part of the reason was the characteristics of Mary's own profession ability. As a vampire sorcerer, a large part of Mary's profession ability was reflected in the embrace. Unlike other sorcerers, Mary had the ability to quickly create secondary blood descendants. Therefore, in order to calculate her true combat power, the various forms of vampire descendants must also be taken into account. Now, Mary had 2 Blood Knights, advanced rank 2, 3 Blood Elves, beginner rank 2, and a recovering Blood Dragon, intermediate rank 2. In addition, there were 13 rank 1 Blood Elves and nearly 100 ordinary vampires. If all of these subordinates were brought out, Mary could not look down on all the other rank 2 sorcerers, but she could at least occupy a relatively high position in the group of rank 2 sorcerers. However, even with Mary's impressive strength, in front of the rank 3 Winter Witch leader, Mo Gunna, she was still a small fry that could be destroyed with a flick of her finger. However, with Mary's extraordinary agility, it would be difficult for Mo Gunna to catch her without the help of the terrain or external objects. After all, Mary's 29 points of agility gave her extraordinary movement and reaction speed. When she exerted her speed to the extreme, most of the creatures in the world were still in her eyes. However, with Mary's 18 points of spirit, it was difficult for her to maintain that overclocking state for a long time. From the brief contact with Mo Gunna, it could be seen that Mary could only maintain this state for 5 seconds at most. After 5 seconds, she would be forcibly kicked out of this strange, overclocking state due to the exhaustion of her spirit. Otherwise, in a completely still world, no matter how powerful a witch was, it would be difficult to escape her slaughter. However, the brief contact with the rank 3, which had also benefited Mary a lot. At least from her point of view, she had found a very suitable direction for her development. If she could improve on this overclocking state, Mary's combat ability would definitely increase explosively. Therefore, as soon as she escaped back to the Tower of Destiny, Mary hid in a secret room and never showed her face again. From the looks of it, she would not rest until she had thoroughly studied this overclocking state. Silent Swamp. The once cold and terrifying magic swamp had now completely changed. A large area of snowstorm raged inside the swamp. Wherever it went, white snow piled up, and all things were desolate. Everything between heaven and earth was frozen in thick and dense ice crystals. The ferocious magical beasts that had gathered in the silent swamp were like cowering little sheep in front of a berserk rank 3 witch. They did not even have the chance to resist before they were turned into ice sculptures one after another, their lives extinguished. The silent swamp was now truly worthy of its name. It had become a silent place where all life was forbidden. Mo Gunna's body was surrounded by a destructive snowstorm. She stood alone at the entrance of the Dragonbone Waste, looking at the faintly discernible mysterious tower at the end of the horizon. The rage and wildness in her heart could not be concealed. A bunch of little fellows that were like underground rats in her eyes actually dared to play tricks in front of her, creating a show. The stimulation and humiliation this brought to M.O. Gunna was simply incomparable. Thinking back to how she had humiliated Alice in every possible way at the Witch Council 2 months ago, the defeats in the past month were like slaps to her face. In fact, Morgana could even imagine the cold and disdainful gazes of the various leaders of the witches at the next Witch Council meeting. The dignity of a rank 3, which was not to be despised. M.O. Gunna roared in her heart. Her eyes that were originally flashing with lightning and rumbling with thunder had strangely turned milky white, just like the snowstorm that filled the sky. "Chief, you can't go." Theo hurried to M.O. Gunna with the other witches. For the first time, a worried look appeared on her cold and ruthless face. However, when she saw M.O. Gunna's horrifying pupils that had almost turned pure white when she fully activated her wizard power, Theo also knew that she was powerless to stop her. Because at this moment, M.O. Gunna had clearly activated her ice-cold bloodline. If she did not let the evil fire in her heart vent out, it would probably harm her body. The Winter Witches looked at each other and could only helplessly disperse to the sides. They watched helplessly as M.O. Gunna turned into a huge snowstorm and walked step by step into the Dragonbone Waste. "Molly, go to Emma City and transfer the 3rd Snow Guard here. Shinaz, go back to the family's encampment and drive all the snow beasts into the Dragonbone Waste. Cielsa, take the others to protect the chief. Also, pay attention to your own safety." Under Deputy Chief Thero's crisp and concise instructions, the remaining witches immediately took action, riding on their flying broomsticks and rushing to different areas. As Rank 2 witches, although they had the ability to temporarily float and fly when it came to long-distance flight, it was still more convenient, faster, and more mental strength to use a flying wizard tool. Chapter 872. M.O. Gunna walked slowly across the Dragonbone Wasteland. Within her line of sight was a desolate land of resentment that was submerged in weeds. From time to time, she could see huge dragon bones buried in the yellow soil and sand in the distance. After thousands of years of wind and frost, there was no longer any trace of color on the white bones. Every time the cold wind blew through the gaps of the bones, there would be the mournful wails of the souls. And on such barren grass, yellow sand, and black soil, innumerable bizarre magical creatures wandered. They were entrenched in groups of 2s and 3s, tirelessly patrolling this wasteland that was cursed by the dragons. Every time there was an invasion from another race, they would swarm forward and use their fearless ferocity and terrifying numbers to keep the bone thieves on this land forever. According to legend, in the depths of the Dragonbone Wasteland, there was a cursed Dragonbone altar, and the Dragonbone altar was built using the bones and dragon crystals of high-tier dragons. Therefore, even though they knew how terrifying the Dragonbone Wasteland was, there was still wave after wave of bone thieves and treasure hunters that flocked here, hoping to dig out 1 or 2 dragon crystals and live a happy life without worries. Of course, since they came, they also stayed. Since then, there was an additional group of mournful wandering souls in the Dragonbone Wasteland. M.O. Gunna, as the leader of the austere witches, naturally knew more about this legend than ordinary people. The Dragonbone altar did exist, but it was not in the wasteland, but hidden deep under the base of the Tower of Destiny. Want to dig out the Dragonbone altar? Sure, let's topple the Tower of Destiny first. The reason why the Tower of Destiny was able to become the origin of the Destiny clan was because of the Dragonbone altar. It could be said that without the Dragonbone altar, the Tower of Destiny would not be as magical. Where did the Destiny Witch's innate ability to sense fate come from? It was the Dragonbone altar under the Tower of Destiny. Therefore, rather than saying that the Destiny Witches were the masters of the Dragonbone Wasteland, it was more appropriate to say that they were the guardians of the Dragonbone altar. As for why the Destiny Witches had the Dragonbone altar from the information stored by the Witch Council, it seemed to have something to do with the ancient Witch King. However, due to the passage of time and the loss of historical records, no one knew the exact details. Therefore, in her rage, Imogen no longer cared about the rules left behind in the ancient times and barged into the Dragonbone wasteland in a destructive manner. As if they had sensed the strong, killing intent, the wraiths, monsters, and monsters in the wilderness charged at Morgana, who was striding forward fearlessly. Following the fall of the Tower of Destiny, these wild beasts were no longer as strong as before. However, the order to protect the tower was still there. Hence, even though they knew that they were no match for the Tier 3, which the wild beasts and magical creatures still bravely charged towards the snowstorm. With their weak first-level strength, before they even reached within 100 meters of Imogena's body, they were already frozen into oddly shaped ice sculptures by a cold gust of wind. As Morgana strode forward, she left behind a 1,000-meter-wide path of ice and snow. On both sides of the path, there were sparkling and translucent ice sculptures of different postures. After brushing away the layer of snow on the surface of the ice sculptures, one could clearly see the ferocious beasts that were glaring at her through the half-meter-thick, transparent ice crystals. Unfortunately, they had already lost their lives and became wandering wraiths in the Dragonbone wasteland. Along the way, there were no ferocious beasts or demonic creatures that could reach Imogen. Naturally, they were unable to stop her from advancing. However, as the majestic snowstorm approached the Tower of Destiny, the huge snowstorm that covered an area of about 2 kilometers immediately became a small vortex in front of the towering Tower of Destiny. It no longer looked as majestic and terrifying as before. Imogen stood proudly in front of the Tower of Destiny, allowing the madly spinning snowstorm to whip the dull, greenish-gray body of the tower. She roared with a majestic voice, "Alice, come out." The voice was so loud and majestic that it caused the nearby wilderness to tremble. Even a group of vengeful spirits flew up from the top of the tower, circling around the body of the tower and howling. Silently, a strange human figure composed of pure light and shadow appeared 100 meters in front of Imogen. As the light and shadow swayed, it gradually turned into Alice's appearance. "Madam Imogen, I didn't expect you to come to my Tower of Destiny in person. Welcome, welcome." Imogen separated her hands, and the snowstorm that coiled in front of her strangely parted to both sides, revealing her tall and vigorous figure. "Alice, don't play dumb with me. How do you plan to end this war?" Looking at the calm and composed Alice, the rage in Imogen's heart grew even stronger. Naturally, her tone was also exceptionally explosive. "It seems to depend on your attitude." Alice still said, softly with a smile, "The chilly winter witches have no essential contradiction with us Destiny witches. This time, it's purely a battle of wills. As long as Madam calms down, the war can end at any time." It's easy for you to say, but who will make up for the losses suffered by us chilly winter witches over the past month? Madam Imogen, the war between witches is like this. If you want to start a war, you have to bear the consequences of the war's backlash. In the previous battle, I have tried my best to suppress those senseless killings otherwise. You mean? Imogen narrowed her eyes, and a wild snowstorm seemed to be brewing in her milky white pupils. "Does it mean that my men can't beat your men?" This time, for some reason, Alice, who had always had a soft figure, did not give in at all. "Isn't that the case, Madam Imogen?" Imogen's anger was even more intense, and even the snowstorm that was circling and flying became fiercer. "I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. Madam Imogen, don't forget that all our witch factions strictly prohibit internal killings, especially between chief-level witches. Any violator will be severely punished by the Witch Council." "Why? Do you want to challenge this rule?" "I didn't forget. But, Alice, don't forget that our two families are now at war. If I challenge you now, can you refuse?" Alice's eyes couldn't help but squint, and there was an indescribable brilliance in them. "I can't refuse." It's good that you understand." Imogen snorted coldly. "I don't want to bully a small rank 2, which like you is a rank 3 witch." So, as long as you take the initiative to admit defeat and hand over the captive chilly winter witches, I accept your challenge. I can let bygones be bygones and let you continue. What? What did you say? Imogen was interrupted by Alice before she could finish her sentence. She seemed extremely surprised. I said, I accept your challenge. Alice said word by word with a stern expression. Do you understand what you are doing? Imogen's milky white pupils were cold, and her whole body exuded a fierce look. I only accepted your faction challenge. Alice became relaxed again. However, you are rank 3, and I am rank 2. You don't mind if I bring a few subordinates, right? Who do you want to bring? Don't worry, I won't violate the witch's rules and bring those rank 3 dragons. I will only bring 4 subordinates, all of them rank 2. Is that okay? No problem. Somehow, Morgana was caught off guard by Alice's counterattack, causing her to stutter and not know how to react. A rank 2 witch leader dared to take the initiative to accept the challenge of a rank 3 witch leader. Even if she brought a few rank 2 subordinates, it was impossible for them to be the opponent. Faced with such a treacherous situation, Imogen was a little confused. I was the one who issued the challenge. Why is the other party more active than me? Is there a trap inside? But Alice has made it clear that she will not bring any rank 3 creatures. So how can she turn the tables? She can't possibly think that she can defeat a rank 3, which with just 4 or 5 rank 2 subordinates, let alone a rank 3 witch leader. Can she? Could it be that Alice also has a large number of rank 2 elemental puppets? It had to be said that the news of Grimm defeating a grade 3 sorcerer with a grade 2 sorcerer in the Scattered Tower Forest had spread throughout the Sorcerer Continent. Even Imogen, who was in the north, had heard about it. However, there were too many prerequisites for such a victory. First, it must be a small arena like the duel arena. If there were no such restrictions, any rank 3 magus would have the initiative to retreat from the battlefield at any time if they were at a disadvantage. How could they be beaten to death by the despicable human wave tactic? Secondly, there were very few monsters like Grimm who could control so many elemental puppets. If not for his shocking number of rank 2 elemental puppets and his willingness to sacrifice them, he would not have been able to force a rank 3 magus into such a predicament. Of course, the decisive advantage in the battle was Grimm's sea of fire concealment. If not for his heaven-defying flame concealment ability, the rank 3 magus would not have been able to find his true body, and the battle would not have dragged on for so long. It was because of all these unexpected factors that the rank 3 magus had fallen to Grimm's despicable methods. However, the battlefield Missouri Gunna had chosen was the vast space in front of the Tower of Destiny. There was no possibility of being surrounded by the enemy. Moreover, Imogen was different from the Crow of Death. She had a large number of area of effect ice spells, so she was not afraid of numbers. Chapter 873. 2 groups of people stood in front of the Tower of Destiny. There was only one on the left. Naturally, it was the Tier 3 witch Morgana, who had transformed into a snowstorm. There were 5 on the right. They were of different races, shapes, and personalities. From left to right, they were Alice, Mary, Bliss, Tigula, and Gru. All of them were Tier 2. Both sides stared at each other coldly from a distance of 400 meters, their eyes bursting with the desire for victory. Are you sure you want to fight me with a group of Tier 2 witches? Morgana's body was once again wrapped up in the wildly spinning snowstorm and floated in the air, almost impossible to see. However, her ice-cold voice penetrated through the whirling storm and reached the ears of the people on the other side. Although Morgana did not deliberately belittle the other party, the arrogance and contempt of a Tier 3, which facing a Tier 2 opponent, was unmistakable. Moreover, the momentum of both sides' appearance completely showed this point. 5 Tier 2 witches, one more low-key than the other, as if they did not want to attract the attention of the Tier 3 witches. Alice was still as calm as ever, allowing little Helen to float in front of her. The 2-meter-tall gray staff in her hand constantly shot silver chains of light into the bodies of several combat companions behind her. There was even a chain of light that penetrated the thick snowstorm barrier and entered Morgana's body. Of course, the blessing for her companions was premonition of fate. This way, Mary and the others could sense the direction of danger 2 or 3 fingers in advance during the battle. And the one that entered Morgana's body was fate's severance. From this moment on, Morgana would lose the blessing of fate and become an abandoned child of fate. She would only return to normal when fate's severance lost its effect. This was no less severe than the punishment of luck, too. Although Morgana was not a witch of fate and was not directly favored by the power of fate. However, seeing that she could become the leader of the Winter Witches, it also showed that the blessing of fate she carried was not much less than Alice. But now, with Alice's Grade 2 fate rend, Morgana could only say goodbye to her path of fate for now. Before she defeated Alice, her past good luck would no longer exist. If she was not careful, she would also suffer the successive attacks of misfortune. Morgana, who was hidden in the blizzard, roared. Although she couldn't figure out what the chain of light had brought to her, she could vaguely sense that this world was strangely rejecting her. For a moment, even the ice particles that she usually controlled with ease suddenly became sluggish, and their circulation became a little sluggish. "Damn it, what did you do to me?" Imogen screamed angrily. She waved her hand and threw out a large ice cloud. "Go to hell." This was a large white cloud made up of pure frozen air and ice mist. As soon as it flew out of the snowstorm, it pressed down on Alice and the others with the momentum of covering the sky and covering the earth. As by Yunfei flew, the frigid air around him began to crackle and crackle as he did so. Some tiny hailstones and frost quickly appeared, dyeing the pure white ice cloud with a layer of sky blue skirt. What a beautiful witchcraft! What a terrifying spell! 2 extreme emotions appeared in everyone's hearts at the same time. Unfortunately, in the next second, everyone immediately became like chickens flying and dogs jumping, panicking as they used their own methods to avoid the rank 3 witches' attack. Alice gently flicked her finger, and a strange stone shining with silvery white light appeared above her head. As soon as the stone appeared, it refracted over 100 silver threads, completely enveloping Alice and little Helen. In the next second, with a flash of silver light, Alice had already disappeared without a trace. Among them, Mary's dynamic vision was the best. She tilted her head and glanced around, seeing Alice's figure quietly appear in a dark corner 2 kilometers away. You run fast." While snorting disdainfully, Mary quickly flapped the bat wings on her back and flew away in a strange slow motion. The white cloud and blue mist were clearly very close to Mary, but they were always unable to catch up to her flying figure by a hair's breadth. The balance between movement and stillness, fast and slow, was just right, causing everyone to sigh in admiration at Mary's strength. Alice and Mary had already run away, and the remaining 3 also began to use their special skills to escape. The insect witch Bliss was undoubtedly the most adept at escaping. His black robe suddenly collapsed, and the black insects turned into wisps of black smoke that entered the soil beneath his feet, disappearing in the blink of an eye. When the clone brain Gru saw the might of the rank 3 witches' casual attack, he was greatly shocked. 500 degrees. The temperature at the core of the white cloud was already close to absolute zero, and the frost damage it could inflict on any living being was above 500 degrees. Although Gru had used expensive magic alloys when forging the magical machinery that carried his brain, it had high magic resistance. But if it wasn't necessary, he didn't want to face such a terrifying witchcraft attack head-on. A beam generator on the clone brain Jelu's shoulder shot out a blinding beam of light, which quickly cut open a black crack in front of him. Jelu's 2 metal hands stretched out and tore the space crack a bit bigger, until it could accommodate him. Then, he went in head first. In the next second, the space 10 kilometers away suddenly lit up with a strong light, and the plane was torn apart once more. Gru forcefully bore through the void storm between the layers of space and emerged. In the blink of an eye, The only person left on the battlefield under the white cloud was the Goblin Ripper. F*CK me. F*CK me. F*CK me. You bunch of disloyal bastards. While cursing angrily, Tigul hurriedly activated the emergency escape device on the Goblin Ripper. Dozens of hollow metal tubes extended from the back of its tall body, and they quickly spat out bright yellow flames. The Goblin Ripper's heavy body that weighed more than 10 tons began to flee at a crazy speed. At least at this moment, the Goblin Ripper's flying speed was comparable to Mary's. However, without Mary's precise control, the Goblin Ripper could only maintain a straight line. If he made a mistake in his calculations and an obstacle appeared in his escape route, then Tigul, who was riding the Goblin Ripper, could only run into it with a look of despair. However, with its sturdy body and violent speed, even a stone mountain would be smashed to pieces by it. The pure white ice cloud landed on the ground, and hundreds of tons of extremely cold aura surged out, sweeping through the earth. Wherever the cold aura went, the earth froze and all things withered. A layer of several meters thick ice crystals quickly spread out in all directions. If someone looked down from the sky, they would see a huge ring of ice suddenly appear near the Tower of Destiny, turning everything within a 5-kilometer radius into a frigid world of death. Imogena's long hair fluttered in the wind. She floated in the center of the crazily spinning ice storm, her milky white eyes staring unblinkingly at the proud and isolated figure at the edge of the huge ring of ice. The other party had teleported right at the edge of the ice cloud's eruption. If she had teleported 1 meter away, she might have been swept up by the extreme eruption of ice energy. But the other party had grasped Imogena's strength perfectly. This meant that the other party had completely grasped the limits of Imogena's strength and had completely seen through her. This undoubtedly caused Imogena's hatred and irritation to increase. Imogena raised her hands high, constantly injecting the ice and snow wizard power in her body into the blizzard around her. Crystalline doors of ice and snow slowly opened up on the huge ring of ice. Following a series of roars, ice and snow guards formed from ice, and snow wizard beasts scurried out of the ice doors, madly roaring as they charged at Alice. Imogena, who was floating in midair, brought her hands together. A large amount of extremely cold energy gathered between her palms, forming a terrifying ball of ice. Die! With a low shout, Imogena threw the ball of ice at Alice. Ice and snow wizard beasts swarmed over from below, while the ball of ice rained down countless ice arrows from above. The moment a level 3, which made her move, her attack was so powerful that it covered the sky and covered the earth. "I'll leave these small fries to you, Bliss," Alice said with a calm smile. She didn't even need to make a move. The little elemental elf Helen, who had been flying beside her, waved her small, matchstick-like magic wand and scattered an elemental barrier. Elemental nullification barrier. Cold immunity. Elemental disruption field. After setting up 5 or 6 elemental barriers in front of her in a single breath, little Helen flew to Alice's shoulder, panting. The ice arrows that spun and shot at her hit the translucent elemental barriers, causing them to tremble. But strangely, the elemental barriers that were as thin as a piece of paper actually blocked all the attacks. Even the pervasive cold energy didn't seep in. A sharp hiss of dissatisfaction came from the void near Alice. Shortly after, 7 or 8 holes suddenly appeared in the ground in front of her, and a tide of black insects swarmed out, facing the ferocious ice and snow wizard beasts head-on. One black and one white, like 2 huge blobs of paint, invaded and infected each other, colliding and infiltrating each other. The ice and snow wizard beasts summoned by the rank 3 winter witch leader were not ordinary monsters. In addition to the hordes of rank 1 creatures, there was no lack of terrifying rank 2 dire beasts among them. The insects that collided head-on with them were not easy to deal with, either. Among the tens of thousands of black beetles, there were also 10 to 20 rank 2 dire beasts. They collided and tore at each other in a frenzy, creating hundreds of deaths at every moment. But with the constant cold energy behind them, it was obvious that the ice and snow wizard beasts had the upper hand on the battlefield. Tygol, help it! Alice was like an extremely calm commander, giving a simple and direct new order. Chapter 874. Dong, dong, dong. A series of flames exploded in the horde of beasts. The raging flames and rapid shock waves instantly engulfed all the ice wizard beasts. For a moment, the ice wizard beasts suffered heavy casualties. However, how could Morgana become the leader of the chilly winter witches by relying on these weak wizard beasts? Taking advantage of the time when the wizard beasts were entangled with the other party, she had already flown into the battlefield. With a wave of one hand, thousands of ice blades and snow swords flew out of the storm circle like a storm, shooting toward the enemy area. Looking at her posture, it seemed that she did not care whether she would accidentally hurt the group of ice wizard beasts below. Damn it! Damn it! Bliss, who was hiding in the dark, cursed repeatedly, desperately commanding the insect swarm to turn into black smoke and flee to the periphery. The Grade 2 void predators flapped their wings and rushed out of the battlefield. After flying for a short distance, their figures gradually faded away. One could only vaguely see a strange shadow streaking across the void and quickly disappearing without a trace. The overwhelming snowstorm wrapped in ice blades and snow swords wreaked havoc on the land in front of them. Under the shooting of transparent ice crystals, a large number of ice wizard beasts were pierced and died a violent death. The black smoke that could not escape in time was also wrapped in it, once again turning into fist-sized black beetles with hard carapaces, sharp fangs, and 2 pairs of transparent elytral wings on their backs. In the wild snowstorm, these black beetles let out strange hisses, swaying left and right from the cold air, their carapaces covered with crystal-clear frost. As soon as the flying speed slowed down, the ice blades and snow swords that were following closely behind instantly strangled them. The entire battlefield was littered with insect corpses that fell like rain. The broken carapaces and broken limbs were frozen in a thick layer of ice before they could even land on the ground. Mary, attract her attention. Alice's body rippled with a silver halo, flashing every second as she wandered around the battlefield. Beside her, exquisite and gorgeous tarot cards rotated rapidly. But as they whirled round and round, the cards remained facing away from Alice and danced round her in a strange and mysterious way. Every time Alice had a thought, she only needed to stretch out her hand, and a strange tarot card would automatically fly into her hand, and the thing sealed in the tarot card would instantly arm her. While Morgana was attacking, Alice had already summoned her witch's mask, Mercury belt, hourglass of time, and scepter of prophecy, arming herself from head to toe. The witch's mask was a destiny wizard artifact. It could obscure the enemy's consciousness and make them ignore the existence of the wearer. This also meant that if Morgana could not use her eyes to personally capture Alice's figure, all the spells she activated would be ineffective against Alice. The Mercury Belt was another fate wizard tool. As long as Alice wore it, she would never be affected by any negative effects. With it, Morgana's large area of effect Frost Chi and Frost Freeze would not be able to trap Alice. The Hourglass of Time was also a powerful destiny wizard tool. If Alice was willing to pour the power of fate into it, she could push back the time on the battlefield to 1 to 5 seconds ago. With the Hourglass of Time, she would never have any regrets on the battlefield. As for the Scepter of Prophecy, it was the main battle wizard tool that Alice had the most control over. With the Scepter of Prophecy in her hand, the whole world was one-sided in Alice's eyes. And when Alice finished arming herself, a strange sonic boom suddenly sounded in the air. A blood-red lightning streaked across the sky and suddenly pierced into the blizzard. With extreme speed and the protection of the blood-red energy, Mary directly penetrated the storm and rushed to Morgana's side before the all-pervasive freezing air could penetrate the blood shadow. Along with an ear-piercing explosion, the blood energy lingering around Mary's body condensed into pieces of blood-red ice under the invasion of the cold air and fell to the sky with a crackling sound. Mary was like a butterfly dancing around a candlelight and hurriedly attacked Morgana several times. But when she saw the berserk power of ice gathering around her, she hurriedly broke through the blizzard and escaped. In just a short period of time, the blood energy in Mary's body had been reduced by more than 30%. As soon as she escaped from Morgana's attack range, she desperately stuffed blood crystals into her mouth. Gru, attack this, and here. While Morgana's attention was attracted by Mary, Alice quickly issued a battle order to the cloned brain Gru that was hiding at the periphery. Although the cloned brain Gru's combat ability was not as strong as the Goblin Ripper, it was definitely second to none when it came to the abundance of magic energy. After all, no one would want to stuff a terrifying magical furnace into their stomach. After receiving Alice's battle guidance, several red dots mysteriously appeared on Morgana's enormous ice storm that could destroy the heavens and extinguish the earth. It was the area that Alice had instructed it to attack. The cloned brain Gru let out a low roar, and its 5-meter-tall heavy body suddenly crouched down. A half-meter-thick black metal cannon extended from its back. In the next moment, a terrifying amount of magic energy poured into it, and with a silent tremor, it turned into 7 energy beams that accurately hit the red dots. The gigantic blizzard tornado suddenly came to a halt. If Morgana had not sensed that something was amiss and used her powerful ice wizard power to hold it in place, it was likely that the violent attack of the cloned brain Jellu would have been enough to destroy this blizzard tornado ring. Just like how Grimm liked to set fire everywhere he went on the battlefield. With the help of the blizzard tornado, most of Morgana's ice spells would be greatly enhanced. Moreover, with the blizzard tornado, anyone who wanted to get close to her would have to pay a heavy price. With that attack, the cloned brain Gru, who was hiding 7 miles away, was instantly targeted by Morgana. The other few Grade 2 Magi were only troublesome to deal with, and could not pose any threat to Morgana. However, the ferocious attack of the Tin-Can had almost destroyed her defensive spell. This made M.O. gonna immediately raise it to the top of her priority list to get rid of. Hence, with M.O. Gunna's clear and furious roar, a few large area of effect ice spells swept towards the cloned brain Jellu with an earth-shattering force. Damn it, bastard, protect me. Gru frantically cried for help through the mental link, while the clone brain put up countless defensive force fields. He dodged left and right between the berserk ice spells, desperately escaping to the periphery. However, how could the elemental spells of a Grade 3 Magus be so easy to deal with? The berserk ice spells froze the earth and the sky, and even sealed Gru's metallic body in a thick layer of ice crystals. With a gust of frigid wind, all the ice crystals instantly shattered and decomposed, returning to the tiniest ice particles. The cloned brain Gru, who had been alive and kicking just a moment ago, also shattered into pieces of ice and could no longer be found. All that was left was a magic furnace flickering with a faint blue glow. Less than a quarter of an hour had passed, and after only 3 rounds of attacks and defenses, one of the 4 helpers Alice had brought had died a heroic death. The remaining few could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Ah, a bunch of Grade 2 Magi dare to come out and die. Morgana, who had succeeded, laughed wildly. However, halfway through her laughter, she was like a hen whose neck had been grabbed, and her laughter came to an abrupt halt. Alice, who was wandering around the periphery of the battlefield, still had a calm expression. The hourglass hanging from her waist suddenly blossomed with a dazzling 5-colored radiance, and then quickly returned to normal. At the place where the cloned brain Gru had died, a small and exquisite hourglass of light suddenly appeared, and the sand of time within it began to rewind in a strange manner. When the hourglass of light began to rewind, the miraculous laws of the plane extracted billions of metal particles from the surrounding ice shards and the ice crystals within a radius of a few hundred meters. Then, like building blocks, they surrounded the magic furnace and pieced them together according to some rules and order. It was as if someone had pressed a rewind button on the entire space-time, and the metallic body that had been smashed into smithereens was pieced back together in front of everyone. When the cloned brain grew, who couldn't be more dead, reappeared in the protective barrier of the metallic body, the hourglass finally exhausted the sand of time and started to fade away. "You bastards, you actually watched me die. I'm going to curse you. Hell, why am I still alive?" The distorted view of space-time, as well as the strange information crazily surging into his brain from the laws of the plane, caused the newly revived clone brain Gru to be at a loss. "Why aren't you running? Are you ready to die again?" At this moment, Alice's delicate voice resounded in the clone brain Gru's mind. The clone brain Gru immediately turned around and ran without hesitation. Damn, what kind of spell was this? How could it be so powerful? It could even save a fellow whose body had been smashed into smithereens? Mary, Tygol, and Bliss watched this miraculous scene from the shadows, and the shock in their hearts was indescribable. However, amidst the shock, it was also accompanied by overwhelming ecstasy. Damn, with such support by my side, do I still need to be afraid of death? Without the need to shout and cheer, the Scarlet Magi's fighting spirit instantly exploded. While they were ecstatic, Imogena's heart was filled with shock. Damn it, damn it, damn it. Was this the true strength of the Destiny Witches? It was indeed as miraculous and profound as recorded in the historical records. However, since they had already become opponents, she absolutely could not give her enemies a chance to turn the tables. After making up her mind, Imogena's fighting spirit instantly exploded, and she once again aimed her attacks at Alice, who was flashing around. Alice was the core of today's battle. If she was not defeated, who knew how many more miracles her miraculous Destiny Witches could create? Chapter 875. As everyone knew, the Fate Witches were never part of the fighting ranks. Thus, most Fate Witches were harmless creatures in the eyes of others. But today, Alice had only revealed her abilities for the first time, and Imogena had already experienced the terror of a high-grade Fate Witch. Due to the existence of the Fate Split, Imogena's luck had been very bad from the start of the battle. This had caused her to miss many good opportunities to quickly kill the enemy. As a veteran who had advanced to grade 3 more than 200 years ago, failure to cast a spell should not have happened to her. But from the start of the battle until now, Imogena had already failed twice in less than half an hour. The first time was when the thread of the silk handkerchief fell into her mouth, causing her to make a mistake while chanting the spell. This caused her to miss the moment when Mary's body suddenly stagnated after breaking into the storm circle to give her a head-on blow. The second time was when an explosive countercurrent within the storm circle hit the ice shield outside her body, and the ice shield just happened to be exhausted at that moment, collapsing on its own. Thus, Imogena, who was disturbed by the countercurrent, missed a good opportunity to directly kill Alice. These two mistakes seemed to have a cause and effect, which would only make people feel that it was a wonderful coincidence and accident. But Imogena knew very well that this was not a coincidence or accident, but the true embodiment of luck after the Fate Split. Luck was something that could never be seen or touched, but it had to be admitted that it really existed. The effect of luck +1 and luck -1 on a person was not as simple as rolling the die more or less, but it would truly affect the coupling between her and this plane's world system. One had to know that the consciousness of the plane was an amalgamation of tens of thousands of living beings and billions of non-living elemental basic substances within the plane. A fellow with luck -1 would feel the great malice behind all things in this plane of existence when he interacted with any matter in this plane of existence. Any intelligent creature that he met would naturally feel disgust and hostility upon seeing him for the first time. And the ferocious birds and beasts that he met would not hesitate to list him as a target of attack. Apart from that, even those non-living substances would cause trouble for him everywhere. An inconspicuous pebble that appeared on his path, a wooden thorn that wasn't polished properly on the wooden stool, a transparent fishbone mixed in the fish soup, and at the critical moment of mixing a high-grade magic medicine, he was absent-minded. Those who had luck, one would feel that the entire world was against them, causing them to stumble and trap them. None of the things they prayed for would succeed, but the things they feared would definitely happen. This was the true power of luck one. Meanwhile, Imogunna was currently suffering from a luck -2 penalty. To be honest, if she wasn't a grade 3 witch but an ordinary person, she wouldn't even need to kill or arrange anything. Just a series of accidents caused by luck. 2 would be enough to make her wish she was dead. On the battlefield, Misuriguna made a lot of strange mistakes and wasted a lot of opportunities that could have ended the battle quickly. This was the reason why this evenly matched battle was able to last for a long time. During this period of time, the 4 who were originally suspicious and distrustful of each other actually started to cooperate and rely on each other to a certain extent under Alice's super support. Among the 5 grade 2 witches, Alice relied on her unique ability to see the big picture and her strange fate witchcraft to become the commander. Mary relied on her extraordinary speed and agility to become a fully deserving assassin and firefighter. Bliss, on the other hand, relied on his Zerg swarm and his sharp and terrifying Zerg war to become a hitman, resisting the ice wizard beasts of the rank 3 witches. Goblin Tigu relied on the powerful combat power of the Goblin Ripper and became the main attacker to break through Imogunna's outer defenses. The clone Brain Jelu relied on the magic furnace in his body and the powerful magic cannons around him to take on the role of a long-range heavy gunner. These fellows originally occupied their own areas, each with their own unique abilities and areas of expertise. But today, they gathered by Alice's side as one and truly displayed their strongest combat power. The battle was fierce and strange, and there was something different about it everywhere. Every time Imogunna used a powerful ice witchcraft, it was time for the 5 grade 2 witches to compete in terms of survival. Against a grade 3 witch, a moment of carelessness could be the difference between life and death. In this battle that lasted for 1.5 hours, Mary died 3 times, Tigga died 5 times, and Jella died once. On the other hand, Alice, who had many trump cards, and Bliss, who was the best at hiding, didn't die even once. In the 41st minute, the ice storm tornado that Morgana had conjured was destroyed by the clone Brain Jelu's powerful magic cannons. From then on, Mary was like a fly that could not be rid of, always accompanying Morgana. As long as she revealed the slightest opening, Mary would use her crazy dual attribute attacks to break her ice shield. Even though Tigu was not far away to attract the enemy's firepower, and even though Mary's 29 points of agility allowed her to advance and retreat freely, she still couldn't avoid dying at Morgana's hands 3 times. The first time was because she was too greedy. At the critical moment when Imogunna's ice shield was about to be destroyed, she didn't retreat and was frozen into an ice sculpture by the sudden eruption of the ring of ice. Using guerrilla tactics in front of Morgana, a 3-second freeze was enough for Mary to die 10 times. The second time was when Mary carried out a melee attack and was turned into a sieve by the furious Morgana's random frost ray. The third and final time was when Imogunna, who had activated her ice bloodline, used the terrifying Lonesome Winter spell to freeze her to death. It had to be known that after Imogunna activated her ice bloodline and cast the terrifying grade 3 spell Lonesome Winter, she could create a domain of extreme cold in half a kilometer around her. This time, Mary and Tigu were hit at the same time, and both were frozen to death in the gorgeous and exquisite world of ice. If it wasn't for Alice's perfect control of the hourglass of time, Imogunna's counterattack would have killed at least one of them. After experiencing several deaths, the 5-man team finally figured out a few tricks to deal with Imogunna. Most of Imogunna's ice spells were powerful and had astonishing freezing effects. However, these spells required 3 to 7 seconds to cast, and there were some obvious signs before they were cast. As long as they grasped these tricks, and Alice's prophecy scepter could predict Mo Gunna's true target every time she attacked. With these factors added together, the five-man team had the best chance to escape. If Mo Gunna wanted to kill someone in an instant, Alice would notify the other party in advance. That person wouldn't need to think about attacking and would only need to run away with all his might. If Mo Gunna wanted to activate a powerful large-scale spell, Alice would be able to predict it in advance and report the best safe distance. Thus, the five-man team retreated to a so-called safe distance and easily used long-range spells to attack Mo Gunna, who couldn't move easily. After being tormented like this several times, Mo Gunna flew into a rage, but there was nothing she could do. That Alice was simply too annoying. Not only was she slippery and difficult to catch, but she had also turned the other four guys into slippery mice, running around and burrowing around her. Every time, she would hide in a place where she couldn't use her full strength, causing most of the ice spells to become meaningless and beautiful fireworks. When fighting against such a group of people, even though single-target spells were powerful, it was difficult to hit them by name. Only a large area of effect, rank 3 witchcraft, could deal significant damage to them. However, level 3 spells weren't cabbages. Even though Mo Gunna had an ice-cold bloodline and her ice wizard power recovered quickly, she couldn't withstand such an extravagant use. Unknowingly, Mo Gunna had fallen from being a dominator of the battlefield to a panting mouse hunter. Her ability to create death pressure on her opponents was getting weaker and weaker. Of course, as the leader of the level 3 Winter Witches, how could Mo Gunna only have this little ability? In the middle of the battle, Mo Gunna actually summoned a level 3 Snowman King in a fit of rage. This was a fellow that looked like a savage. It was 4 meters tall, with 4 strong arms and thick gray fur. Its face was flat and crude, and it was best at throwing snowballs. What it threw was not the soft frostball of a level 1 Magus, but a terrifying snowball with a diameter of 1 meter and a weight of half a ton. When it hit the ground, it created a strong splash effect. The snowball had 150 degrees of physical attack power, 120 degrees of freezing damage, and 70 degrees of ice crystal splash damage at 110 meters. When the Berserk Yeti King attacked everyone at an extremely fast speed of 8 shots per second, the cooperation of the five-man team was successfully disrupted. At the crucial moment, the Goblin Tigu made a huge sacrifice, using himself to attract Mo Gunna's firepower. The rest of the team used this time to launch a frenzied attack on the Snowman King. In the end, under the guidance of Alice's weakness, the cloned brain jelly used the full power of the magic furnace to create a beam of energy that pierced through the Snowman King's chest, shattering the core of its consciousness into pieces. Of course, the Buglich Bliss contributed 7 Void Predators to break through the Snowman King's chest in advance. This was also the key to Jello's ability to kill the enemy in one shot. Chapter 876. The battle had been stopped. Seeing that their leader could not win, the austere witches led by Thero immediately intervened in the battle and took the dejected Morgana away. According to the agreement, Alice and the others naturally won the battle. Although Morgana was not directly defeated and saved some face for the austere witches, the battle between the Witches of Destiny and the austere witches ended with the defeat of the austere witches. Such an unexpected outcome left the entire northern lands flabbergasted for a moment. However, the Crimson family had also successfully overcome their identity crisis. Although most of the northern witches were still dissatisfied with the relationship between Grimm and Alice, it was difficult for them to make a fuss about the identity of the Crimson family. Of course, in this battle, the other witch factions may not have suffered any losses, but the austere witches had suffered a terrible loss. Not only did they lose nearly half of their territory, they even lost more than a third of the family's most important resource points. If not for the fact that the austere witches had accumulated over the years, there would have been a faction crisis. After that, in order to redeem their captured sisters, the austere witches were forced to pay a large number of high-level wizard weapons. This could be considered to have alleviated the awkwardness of the Crimson family's lack of master alchemists. Although Grimm had mastered some alchemy, he put most of his energy into the creation of magic puppets and magic tattoos, and his performance in the creation of wizard weapons was mediocre. There were not many equipment and items seized from the giant dragon's treasure that were suitable for wizards, so the arrival of this batch of spoils had indeed solved a big problem for the Crimson family. The battle this time seemed to have a huge impact on Mary. After returning from the Tower of Destiny, she locked herself in the secret room of the Flame Monarch's wizard pagoda, secretly preparing something. Grimm heard the news while he was enjoying his fire dragon ribs. Grimm only stopped eating his knife and fork for a moment when he heard such a major event that could determine the future of the family. After a short "oh," he tilted his head and thought for a moment, then continued with his unfinished business. The Crimson family's current scale could not be supported by a single level 3 wizard. So if the Crimson family wanted to continue developing and expanding, it was essential to improve the family strength. Apart from Grimm, a large number of Scarlet Magi were needed to contribute to the family business. Only then would the Crimson family have a future. If they relied on their fists to conquer the world, then when Grimm fell, the Crimson family would fall apart. When the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. Now Alice, Mary, and Bliss stood up and had their own glory and pride. This was what Grimm had been hoping for the most. As the biggest boss of the Crimson family, now that he had a powerful subordinate who could share his burdens, Grimm could naturally spend more time on things that he was interested in. Using the opportunity to eat, Grimm quickly browsed through the rank 3 spells that the AI chip had recently optimized. He could not help but feel a surge of pride in his heart. Berserk Fireball, rank 3, fire single target spell, chanting time, 1 to 2 seconds cooldown. 5 seconds consumes 2 spiritual force. Attack power, 310 to 330 degrees. Killing range, 20 to 30 meters. Comes with fire poison and ice flames. Lava armor. Rank 3, fire and earth dual element defensive spell. Chanting time, 2 to 4 seconds cooldown. 45 seconds consumes 3 spiritual force. Physical defense, 450 degrees. Elemental defense, 300 degrees. Additional fire damage reflect. Flaming Gate, rank 3, fire summoning spell. Chanting time, 8 to 15 seconds cooldown. 15 minutes consumes 7 spiritual force. Summons a fire creature with a total of 1,270 degrees of fire energy. Can summon a level 3 giant fire elemental. Molten Fire World, rank 3, fire AoE spell. Chanting time, 10 to 16 seconds cooldown. 50 seconds consumes 6 spiritual force. Summons a 100-meter asterisk 80-meter pillar of flame. Attack power within 30 meters of the core area, 450 to 480 degrees. The power of the flames decreases outwards. Every 10 meters, the power decreases by 50 degrees. Meteor Burst, rank 3, fire and earth dual element single target spell. Chanting time, 8 to 12 seconds cooldown. 35 seconds consumes 4 spiritual force. Fire damage, 260 to 280 degrees. Physical damage, 220 to 240 degrees. Killing range, 20 to 30 meters. Additional 40 degrees of earth splash damage. Flame teleportation, short distance. Rank 3, fire and earth dual element mobile spell. Chanting time, 3 to 5 seconds cooldown. 25 seconds consumes 3 spiritual force. Allows the caster to teleport to an area with fire runes. Maximum teleportation distance, 3,000 meters. These 5 spells were the rank 3 spells that Grimm had derived and optimized through the AI chip. They were not generic rank 3 spells. Hence, if Grimm submitted them to the Wind of Freedom's Hall of Knowledge, there was a high chance that he would be rewarded with contribution points. However, these were battle spells that Grimm had prepared for himself. If he made their detailed data public, it would be easy for his enemies to grasp the core data of his battles. From this point alone, it was impossible for Grimm to make them public. As for the first elemental equipment, it had been polished and optimized over the past few days. It already possessed some basic combat capabilities. However, it lacked the support of the magic furnace. Ordinary grade 2 elemental puppet crystal cores could only sustain it for 5 minutes. Grimm had used the energy resonance sequence of 3 Class 2 elemental puppet crystal cores to allow him to fight for a quarter of an hour. This made Grimm even more eager to obtain a new batch of Kair's alloy. The first 9-headed puppet created by most of the goblin engineers was about to go offline, but there was still no progress on the magic furnace that was the energy core. As a result, Grimm had been visiting the Trading Hall of the Winds of Freedom's mental illusion more frequently these days. However, the frightening price of Kair's alloy and ores could only make Grimm flinch. Perhaps it was because of Grimm's continuous inquiries about Kair's alloy over the past year. He had finally attracted someone who was interested. On this day, Grimm had just finished his daily meditation and entered the spiritual illusion once again. In the Trading Hall of Door 1, he was stopped by a tall, skinny man who looked extremely young. "You are Flame?" The tall, skinny man sized Grimm up carefully. Flame was a special code name that Grimm had given himself. After all, in this spiritual illusion, he needed a fake identity to communicate and trade with others. "I am Flame. What business do you have with me? I have a mission here that you might be interested in." The tall, skinny man smiled mysteriously. "Mission? Aren't those things supposed to be in the mission hall?" Grimm could not help but narrow his eyes. In the spiritual illusion, his appearance was that of a humanoid flame, and his face was covered by a golden mask. It was difficult for others to discover his true identity through these characteristics. "You don't have to care about that. Take a look at this mission first." The tall, skinny man flicked his finger, and a purplish-black ball of light floated in front of Grimm. Beep. Strange data detected. "Host, please indicate whether to accept." "Accept." As a bone-chilling sensation flowed into his body of consciousness, a strange set of data formed in his mind. Banishing creatures from Molten City, Grade 3. Mission Creator. Molten City Lord Mission Details. Molten City, located in the Skeeties region, has been invaded by fiery creatures from another world for the past 2 years. So far, 1 Grade 2 wizard, 3 Grade 1 wizards, and a number of apprentices have died. The underground mine of Molten City has also been severely affected. Mission Reward. 50,000 magic crystals, 1,200 merit points mission requirement. Recruit 2 Grade 3 wizards. Grimm skimmed through it briefly and shook his head in disinterest. These days, he was still consolidating his strength after advancing to Grade 3. It was not suitable for him to leave his family and carry out any dangerous missions. Thus, he refused without hesitation. The tall, skinny man seemed to have been prepared for this. He spoke to Grimm in a low voice. "I heard that you were searching for Kaira's alloy everywhere." Grimm was stunned when he heard this and stopped in his tracks. "You have news about Kaira's alloy? I won't hide it from you. The underground mine of Molten City produces Kaira's alloy. However, it mainly produces Eternium Oregon Kaira's, or is only a byproduct." Grimm squinted his eyes. "You are the master of Molten City?" The expert smiled faintly. "The master of Molten Castle is a Grade 4 wizard, and I'm just a hired wizard working for him." Grimm carefully sensed the other party. Although he did not know the other party's identity, he was definitely a Grade 3 wizard. Grimm hesitated for a moment, but he could not help but ask, "Is there anything else you can tell me about this mission?" "That beast broke into Molten City 2 years ago. Its origins are very strange. It seems to have entered Molten City through the underground tunnel of the Lava Sea. Once it arrived, it occupied the Lava Sea near the underground mine and often harassed the wizard beasts mining. So far, Molten Fire City has lost countless people and equipment. Did you not take any measures to kill it? It seems to be a fire creature with intelligence. It's extremely cunning and never goes deep into Molten City. It only eats Eternium or near the mine. The master of the city wanted to capture it, but as soon as the master approached, it would hide in the depths of the lava sea and never show its head again. Once the master left, it returned to its old ways and came to cause trouble. These days, we've suffered a lot. Has its strength been confirmed? We've already sent people to check if it's a mid-grade or high-grade rank 3 fire creature. If it wasn't for the environment being especially suitable for it, we would have killed any other rank 3 fire creature long ago. After hearing this, Grim could not help but lower his head and ponder. It seemed like the other party had found him because of his identity as a fire elemental magus. Seeing that Grim was tempted, the tall, skinny man could not help but add more information. Chapter 877. Grim arrived at Rain City 3 days later. The Scoties region where Molten City was located was tens of thousands of miles away from the Alovis region, where Grim was. He had to cross 4 different regions on the way, and it was impossible for him to travel by flying wizard beasts. Hence, he had to rely on the Silver Alliance's floating ship. The treatment that Grim received in Rain City this time was vastly different from the last time he visited. Just as he dismounted his manticore, before he even reached his temporary residence, the manager of the Wizard Tower had already sent a magus to wait for him at the entrance. "Lord Grim, what brings you to Rain City? If there's anything I can do for you, please let me know." The person in charge of receiving him was a grade 2 magus. Most of his exposed skin had been replaced by a strange, silvery white metal, and his appearance was somewhat terrifying. "I have something to do in the Scoties region, and I'd like to take a floating ship here. There is nothing to keep secret about this mission, so Grim did not try to hide it." "No problem. There'll be a floating ship heading west the day after tomorrow. I'll arrange it for you. Also," the magus smiled, "there'll be a magus gathering in the Golden Hall of the Wizard's Pagoda tonight. I wonder if you..." "Understood. Send someone to inform me when the gathering starts." "All right, I'll inform them now." With Grim's promise, the magus immediately left, beaming with joy. It was obvious that the higher-ups of the Rain City Wizard Tower were looking forward to Grim's arrival. It had to be known that more than half of the Alovis region, where Rain City was located, had fallen into the hands of the Crimson family. The rise of the Crimson family seemed unstoppable. Under these circumstances, building a good relationship with Grim would undoubtedly be beneficial to the development of Rain City. Hence, whether it was for public or private reasons, the higher-ups of the Wizard's Pagoda had to put on a high profile. A Grade 2 sorcerer might still be suppressed and attacked, but for a Grade 3 sorcerer, other than those old monsters who hid behind the scenes and did not show themselves easily, they were already considered to be one of the top powers in the sorcerer world. This was especially so for combat magi like Grim, who had displayed great strength. They could only be roped in, not suppressed. Hence, the higher-ups of the Wizard's Pagoda had a completely different attitude towards Grim's arrival. They even seemed to want to mend the cracks in their relationship. Of course, Grim was well aware of this. He also wanted to make use of this opportunity to get in touch with the high-level magi in the Pagoda Forest. As night fell, the Golden Hall was filled with distinguished wizards from all levels of the wizards of the Pagoda. The regular gathering of the wizards of the Wizard's Pagoda was supposed to be held 5 days later, but the upper echelons of the Wizard's Pagoda had no choice but to bring it forward due to the arrival of an esteemed guest. The wizards that were stationed at the Wizard's Pagoda in Rain City had already found out who the mysterious guest of honor was through various means. Hence, they had arrived at the Golden Hall early in the morning and occupied a better spot. They chatted softly with familiar friends while waiting for the arrival of the guest of honor. Some of the wizards who hadn't personally experienced it asked in a low voice, while the wizards who had witnessed it began to describe it in detail, as if they had seen it for themselves. A Tier 2 sorcerer defeating a Tier 3 sorcerer by himself. Such a thing should have been impossible, yet it had happened in Rain City. Therefore, they felt honored for a very, very long time. A group of musicians dressed in exquisite clothing were performing elegant music in a corner of the hall. Waiters and waitresses in well-ironed attire shuttled between the wizards with smiles on their faces, serving cups of fine wine and plates of pastries on exquisite trays. The male and female wizards in robes of various colors were casually standing in the corners of the hall, chatting and laughing as they toasted each other. A few female wizards with good looks and figures were dressed in unusually sexy attire, quickly becoming the center of attention in the banquet hall. There were only 3 level 3 wizards in the Wizard's Pagoda in Ryan City. One of them had gone to the south to handle some personal affairs and had not returned. Hence, there were only 2 level 3 wizards in the Golden Hall. One was the body-tempering wizard Zoster, and the other was the earth element wizard Logner. They occupied the center of the hall, surrounded by a group of vassal wizards. They chatted casually as they scanned the entrance of the hall. "How much do you know about this wizard Grimm? I heard that he is not even 200 years old this year. Is this information reliable?" The last time Grimm came to the Wizard's Pagoda in Ryan City, the body-tempering wizard Zoster was not in the pagoda, so he did not come into contact with Grimm. Hence, he was skeptical of the rumors. The earth element wizard Logner held a glass of red wine in his hand, gently swirling it, a faint smile on his face. "I don't know much more than you do, and it's all just rumors of the past. However, he is indeed very young. The rumor that he is not even 200 years old could very well be true." Hiss! Zoster could not help but gasp. "Not even 200 years old. Doesn't that mean he has a high chance of advancing to level 4? Just based on time and talent, he might very well become a level 4 wizard in the future." Logner's smile did not diminish, and he chuckled. "I'm afraid those fellows who want to suppress this young wizard will have a huge headache." Zoster also laughed dryly. Everyone knew about the conflict between Grimm and his old family, the Cerubo family. Now that Grimm's Crimson family was rising in power in the Alovis area, the Cerubo family would probably have the most trouble at this moment. In the past, there might have been many opportunists who tried to suppress Grimm out of respect for the great wizard Cerubo. But now, he had become a level 3 wizard, and he had shown the potential to advance to level 4. Under such circumstances, which idiot would dare to offend a future tier 4 sorcerer? Before the Cerubo family could produce a new level 4 wizard, they would have to think of a way to reconcile with Grimm. The great wizard Cerubo was indeed powerful, but it was a pity that he was in the outer realm and could not return to the Magus world. This meant that the Cerubo family had lost their only chance of suppressing Grimm. Of course, if Grimm was not stupid, he would not have taken the initiative to provoke the Cerubo family. After all, the Cerubo family had 2 level 3 bloodline magi overseeing it, and their strength was among the top in the central continent. Seeing the 2 level 3 magi chatting, the many level 1 and 2 magi around them could only smile apologetically and listen in silence. At this moment, those who could speak in front of the 2 level 3 magi were naturally those closest to them. "Teacher, the Wizard Pagoda just received some news from the north a few days ago. It seems to have something to do with Lord Grimm." The one who spoke was a middle-aged magus at level 2. He had a serious expression on his face. He was the disciple of the level 3 earth element magus Logner. "Oh, tell me about it." Logner nodded. "Yes, this news came from the Black Rose Merchant Guild in the north. It said that the battle between the Witches of Destiny and the Winter Witches has ended." "Teacher, can you guess who won?" "Normally, it should be the Winter Witches who won. But since you're asking, could it be that the Witches of Destiny won?" Logner could not help but narrow his eyes. "Yes, teacher." The news they brought back was very clear. The Witches of Destiny won. West, who was listening by the side, could not help but frown. "We're talking about Grimm. What northern witches are you talking about? Could it be that those northern witches are related to Grimm?" Logner shook his head and sighed. "West, you're still too out of touch with the news. You might not know this, but the young Grimm has a close relationship with the Witches of Destiny. It's said that the current leader of the Witches of Destiny is Grimm's secret lover. Don't you think this news is shocking?" "What? There's such a thing?" West's eyes immediately widened, his face full of shock and disbelief. The leader of the Northern Witches was regarded as a grade 4 witch in the scattered forest of towers. To be related to them, the resources, the wealth, the power. You could simply ask for anything. For a moment, even West was a little jealous of that lucky kid. "Lord Grimm has arrived. As the deacon apprentice at the entrance of the hall loudly announced his name, all the magi in the hall stopped talking and turned to look at the entrance. There, a tall, young, and handsome man strolled in. A pair of dark eyes swept across the crowd and fell straight on the two grade 3 magi. The two grade 3 magi immediately raised their glasses and nodded in greeting. Grimm strode towards the two of them. The vassal magi gathered around the two grade 3 magi tactfully retreated to the sides, leaving a place for the three to talk in peace. "Welcome, Wizard Grimm. Thank you for your kind intentions. I'm also very honored to pay a visit." After a simple exchange of greetings, the three gathered together and chatted happily. The topics they talked about did not involve any cooperation or communication between the two parties. Instead, it was all related to the things that a magus needed to pay attention to after advancing to grade 3. From this aspect, it could be seen that the three of them were talking on the surface, but in secret, the two veteran magi were silently teaching and guiding the new magus, Grimm. Chapter 878. 2 days later, a flying ship belonging to the Scattered Pagoda Forest Association rose from a tall wooden platform. It slowly adjusted its course and began to accelerate towards the west. As one of the passengers, Grimm mixed into the crowd on the deck. Those who could board the airship were either magi or nobles of high status. Although there were many people on the deck, it was still orderly and refined. In the magus world, there were many large organizations, so there was no fixed standard for magi to wear. In terms of color, there were no restrictions. However, under normal circumstances, elemental magi liked to wear light and soft robes due to their weaker physiques. Body tempering and bloodline magi had a wider range of clothing. From light leather armor with decent defense to metal armor with astonishing defense, there were almost no taboos. Hence, it was difficult to judge a magus' true strength just by looking at their attire. In order to avoid unnecessary trouble, Grimm did not wear his usual crimson magus robe. Instead, he chose a normal black robe with a flight spell. Hence, from his appearance, it was easy for normal people to mistake him for a low-ranked magus. Grimm did not have any interest in conversing with others. He held the railing of the ship and quietly looked down at the natural scenery below him. He was still thinking about the series of meetings and private conversations he had over the past 2 days. In public, no one would talk about such secretive matters. However, after Grimm returned to his residence, a large number of magi came to visit him. Among them were 2 representatives from grade 3 magi. It was obvious that these fellows were quite optimistic about the Crimson family's development. They all represented the families or organizations behind them to propose extremely favorable conditions for cooperation and transactions with Grimm. Some of the conditions proposed by the collaborators were so favorable that it was as if they were giving the Crimson family great benefits for free. They were using this method to form a relationship with this rising family. However, the delicious bait had a hook that was difficult to swallow. These fellows who were willing to sacrifice resources and magic crystals to join the Crimson family's war chariot were definitely carrying a huge burden on their shoulders. Once they swallowed their bait, it would mean that they were carrying a certain amount of trouble for the other party. If their enemy or organization was a small or medium-sized magus family, the Crimson family would naturally agree without hesitation. However, if this trouble involved a few high-ranked magi, then the Crimson family would be asking for trouble. Hence, Grimm did not slack off during the 2 days he stayed in the Wizard's Pagoda in Rain City. He had been interacting with all sorts of people. With Grimm's information, as well as the guidance of the 2 grade 3 magi, he naturally knew how to deal with these uninvited fellows. After sending them to the Scarlet Butler Gargamel, who had been left behind to guard the Blazing Flame Monarch, Grimm boarded the airship alone and began his journey alone. The distance between Alovis and Tixtet was about 110,000 kilometers. Even with the speed of an airship, it would take half a month to get there. Therefore, Grimm could easily enjoy the freedom of the journey. When the airship rose into the sky and began to fly above the clouds, the temperature on the flight deck would suddenly drop very low. And Magi of the airship, Magus Maggle to Magus, to the airship too. The Magus's tower's ship. No matter how thick their clothes were, they could not withstand the low temperature. Hence, they hid in the cabins protected by the elemental barrier. There were a dozen or so Magi scattered around. Judging from their clothes and mental energy ripples, most of them were grade 1 Magi. There was no one worth paying attention to. Only a bald, white-haired old Magus at the corner of the deck saw Grimm's gaze and immediately nodded and bowed, showing a fawning expression. With the help of the Chip, Grimm reacted instantly. It seemed that this fellow had the chance to attend the Wizard's Pagoda's welcoming banquet and had seen him before. Grimm did not have the time to deal with such a small fry. His gaze paused on the old man for a moment before looking elsewhere. The old Magus did not dare to disturb Grimm due to his status. He turned to talk to another Magus. There were so many Magi that there were naturally all sorts of people with different personalities and hobbies. Some were good at talking, while others were cold and distant. After being rebuffed twice, the old sorcerer actually chatted with a young sorcerer and a young sorcerer. They were obviously a couple, and their relationship was so close that it was enviable. After a while, Grimm, who was a little tired of the scenery below him, tidied up his robe and walked into the cabin. The old Magus who was chatting had been staring at Grimm from the corner of his eyes. Seeing him leave, he slowly let out a sigh of relief. Although it was an honor to bump into a legendary Magus, the mental pressure was also immense. As if noticing the old Magus's reaction, the couple could not help but sneak a glance at Grimm. Seeing the tall and broad figure of the old Magus disappear into the cabin, the young and charming female Magus could not help but look at him with an infatuated gaze. He looks like a strong Magus. Is he a physique-tempering Magus? As if dissatisfied with his companion's performance, the other male Magus could not help but frown. What's so good about a physique-tempering Magus? He soaked himself in all sorts of strange liquids all day long, and his body always smells weird. F***CK, they really are a pair of inexperienced newbies. They actually dare to publicly comment on a Magus that they don't know anything about. They really don't know how to write the word death. The old Magus quickly interrupted their nonsense and continued to enthusiastically explain the previous mission to them. The ruins are at the edge of the dark forest. Although it has been searched a few times, there's still some things left inside. As long as you listen to me, I guarantee that you will be able to obtain some good resources from there. The old Magus continued to ramble on, but by this time, Grimm had already entered the cabin and was affected by the omnipresent spell formation, so the rest of the content could not be heard. Grimm only listened to these insignificant people and did not pay much attention to them. The old Magus looked like a piece of trash who had no hope of advancing and had barely reached his current level through the torment of years. From the gleam of his eyes, Grimm could feel a faint malicious intent that was well hidden. It seemed that the two young Magi had become his prey. If they were tricked into the so-called ruins, they would either fall into a trap or fall into a trap. One could only imagine what would happen to them. But what did that have to do with Grimm? As the higher-ups of the Wizard's Pagoda in Rain City had already informed them beforehand, the Magus in charge of the flying ship had undoubtedly given Grimm the largest and most luxurious room on the ship. The interior of the flying ship was not very spacious. Other than the cargo hold on the bottom floor, the rest of the rooms were very small. Even the official sorcerers lived in small and narrow cabins. But when Grimm followed the Magus in charge to his room, he felt refreshed. The room in front of him was not only spacious and bright, but it was also clearly divided into two floors. The outer floor was naturally a guest room and a study, while the inner floor was a bedroom and a separate workshop. There was even a small alchemy table in the room. That way, since Grimm was on the move, he could also take care of some of the alchemy items that he carried with him. At this point, ordinary level 1 and 2 magic puppets could not help him at all. But level 3 elemental essence crystals were not that easy to obtain, so Grimm could only try his best to create some low-level magic puppets to strengthen the personal combat power of the Magi in the family. With the family's private resource points starting to operate, coupled with the large amount of giant dragon resources in the Lance dimension, the Crimson family had a stable resource collection system. Under these circumstances, the convenient and practical elemental magic puppets were no longer sold as a strategic resource, but instead became an internal benefit for the Crimson Magi. Therefore, during this lonely journey, reading books, looking at the scenery along the way, and taking the time to create some unique elemental magic puppets, this became a daily routine for Grimm. For the current Grimm, meditation had almost no effect on increasing his mental strength. However, after hundreds of years of practice, 4 hours of meditation a day had become an unshakable basic daily routine. Even though the increase was small, if he persisted for a long time, he would still be able to accumulate some results. If he wanted to become a truly powerful magus, he would not be able to do so without toiling day after day. Even during this seemingly leisurely journey, the AI chip in Grimm's mind was still operating at high speeds, analyzing the progress of each mission in an orderly manner. After reaching level 3, Grimm's spiritual force had increased, and so had the AI chip's ability to calculate and process data. Grimm found that even without the help of the AI chip, his brain could now process large amounts of data at high speeds. Roughly estimating, he was now comparable to the AI chip when it was at level 1. This also explained how high-ranked Magi dealt with complicated three-dimensional spell formations that were divided into different levels. With the help of powerful spiritual force, the brain of every high-ranked magus was developed to the fullest. In terms of functions, they were not any weaker than an AI from his previous world. Some Magi even used strange spells to stimulate the abnormal growth of their brains, then cut them out and store them in their personal wizard's pagoda. This way, with the strange connection between the brain and the clone brain, these Magi could obtain extraordinary memory and an almost limitless memory storage space. From this point of view, it was like they had a primitive chip that was constantly assisting them. If Grimm were to encounter such a fellow, the advantage of the AI chip would be wiped out in an instant. Chapter 879. This was a completely different world. Every time he traveled in the sorcerer world, this strong feeling gave Grimm a different feeling. On Earth, the source of photosynthesis energy came from the sun. Hence, the climate, environment, temperature difference, humidity, all these factors had different levels and transitions. However, in this strange high magic world, the growth of all living things and the topography were affected by the flow of magic aura, displaying all kinds of strange and treacherous features. Generally speaking, due to the influence of the high magic environment, the plants and animals here were abnormally tall and strong. Tall plants that were more than 100 meters tall could be found everywhere, and many of them showed signs of turning into magic. As for the animals, they were even more ferocious and terrifying, opening one's eyes. Even some of the little white rabbits that people on Earth loved in the past could evolve into carnivorous magical creatures. When they became fierce, they were even more terrifying than the wild wolves on Earth. Although in such a high magic environment, humans evolved to be stronger than their counterparts on Earth, running faster, enduring longer, and having more developed muscles. They were still at a serious disadvantage when compared to wild magical creatures. If it were not for the fact that some of the strongest humans had surpassed the limits of their bodies and minds, and grasped some extraordinary powers, humans would never have been able to become the rulers of the plane. As for the environment that humans lived in, due to the abnormal flow and gathering of magic aura, there were also strange traces left on the vast land. The vast and boundless dark forest, the magic swamp with a heavy and damp fog, the vast desert that covered the sky, the desolate and dilapidated wilderness, the towering and steep mountains, and the kingdom of ice and snow covered in pure white snow. The sorcerer continent below the airship was like a large and small magical continent. Looking from afar, one could always find some strange places in the remote mountains and swamps. The climate and environment of these places were obviously incompatible with the surrounding areas. They were like magic pearls that had been sprinkled on the Sorcerer Continent, causing people to sigh in amazement. Most of these places were due to the special structure of the terrain, which caused the abnormal gathering of magic aura. Later, after a great effort by the sorcerers, they were turned into resource points that were conducive to the growth of magical plants and animals. From then on, the sorcerers had a stable and long-term source of large amounts of sorcerer resources. To put it bluntly, the stable and robust growth of the sorcerer community was closely related to the development and utilization of a large number of resource points. Therefore, when the airship flew high above the clouds and had a panoramic view of the mountains and rivers within hundreds of miles, a peculiar feeling slowly grew in the bottom of his heart. Under the clouds, the terrain of the continent stretched out. Tall and undulating mountain ranges could be found everywhere. Some of them extended for tens of thousands of kilometers, while others were rugged and precipitous, with dangerous peaks standing in great numbers. Human villages, towns, and cities of various sizes were scattered in the sky. In addition to the lakes and rivers that were scattered all over the place, it reflected an extremely perfect human world. However, this extremely perfect human world was actually controlled by many big and small sorcerer organizations or forces. In the sorcerer world, due to the existence of large areas of undeveloped primitive lands and vast dark forests, if a country established by humans lacked the protection of a powerful sorcerer, it would be almost impossible to resist the invasion of powerful magical beasts, barbaric races, and mutated creatures. Therefore, there were almost no pure human countries. Most of the people in power in the city-state system would choose to attach themselves to a powerful sorcerer organization, using annual offerings in exchange for a guarantee of safety. The two complemented each other and blended into one. Therefore, the true owners of this seemingly peaceful and beautiful land were not the ordinary humans who work hard on it, but the enormous sorcerer community that occupied the peak of the human world. Originally, with the difficulty of advancing as a sorcerer, this peak should belong to a small group of people who grasped ultimate power. However, due to the earth-shattering increase in the lifespan of sorcerers compared to humans, with the accumulation of tens of thousands of years, this small group of people had astonishingly become an extremely large community. If these fellows were still gathered in the sorcerer world, with the size of the sorcerer continent, it would be very difficult for it to support such a huge demand. Therefore, out of consideration for the long-term development of the sorcerer world, these top-notch sorcerers either voluntarily or under compulsion left their homes and rushed to the outer realm, creating an alternative world in the depths of the void plane. To put it bluntly, those who remained in the sorcerer world were only the seeds of the sorcerer faction. Every 100 years, the sorcerer world would send a certain amount of fresh blood to the sorcerer faction in the outer realm, using this method to continue the entire sorcerer civilization. He slowly closed the book in his hand. Grimm closed his eyes and silently thought about his understanding of the sorcerer civilization. Although he did not know much about the secrets of the ancient sorcerers, it did not prevent him from observing and thinking about the development of the entire sorcerer civilization from the perspective of a third party. This was also a way for high-grade sorcerers to understand themselves and the world. Without a grasp of the mainstream of the development of the plane world and the will of the plane world, it was simply wishful thinking for high-grade sorcerers to want to break through the boundaries of the plane and grasp the power of a higher order. Take Grimm, for example. Since he had chosen to specialize in fire, he could only do his best to grasp the law of fire. To achieve this goal, there were two ways to choose. The first was to continuously polish his compatibility with the law of fire through years of analysis and practice, using the accumulation of time and experience to break through the threshold of laws. To be honest, most creatures in the fire elemental plane used this method to advance. However, this method had its advantages and disadvantages. The advantage was that once he broke through the threshold of laws, his strength would increase by leaps and bounds, and he would quickly become a member of the law-defying sorcerers. The disadvantage was that it took a long time for him to break through the threshold of laws. Those who were not elemental creatures who had no concept of time would find it difficult to endure the long and painful period of training. Although Grimm's life had been greatly extended, he still could not reach the near-immortal state of elemental creatures. Therefore, the method of leveling up for elemental creatures was not suitable for him. The second method was to use external objects to shorten the experience and analysis process, thus completing the necessary accumulation of the Law of Fire. According to Grimm's knowledge, most high-grade sorcerers actively participated in plane expeditions. On one hand, it was for the development of the sorcerer faction, and, on the other hand, it was to obtain the extremely precious plane origin. The plane source was actually the materialization of the plane laws of a plane world. These planar laws were originally nothingness and direction. They were born from the planar world's origin consciousness, and then weaved into a huge net of nothingness that enveloped the entire planar world, including all the matter and life within the planar world. Under normal circumstances, all matter and life within a plane would follow the laws of the plane. They would be born, sprouted, grew, strengthened, aged, and died in an orderly fashion. Even though every rock, every piece of soil, every life, and every soul had their own uniqueness and would play out different scenes of life. However, behind the real world, there is still a large net that did not let through, secretly controlling everything. And this net was the all-encompassing, and all-encompassing plane laws. However, this was only under normal circumstances. At certain times, under certain abnormal circumstances, the net of laws of the plane world would also become unstable, and strange phenomena would occur. These abnormal circumstances could easily lead to the abnormal deaths of millions of life within the plane world, which would then lead to the loss and damage of the net of laws. Once the power of laws that had drifted out combined with some matter within the plane, it would form an origin substance. This so-called origin substance was actually a strange substance that was imbued with the laws of the plane. If one could obtain this origin substance and use special methods to extract the power of the laws of the plane that was imbued within, it would undoubtedly help Magi comprehend the laws of the plane with twice the effort. If a high-grade magus did not want to live to the end of his life without truly comprehending the laws of the plane, finding this origin substance was undoubtedly a feasible shortcut. Of course, this kind of origin substance was extremely rare within a realm. However, in those planes that had been trampled upon, due to the invasion of other races and the trembling of the plane's origin, the chances of the net of laws breaking and producing origin substance would increase greatly. There were even some radical magi who would deliberately destroy the stability of the laws of the plane they were invading to facilitate the birth of the origin substance. As for the large number of deaths or extinctions that would occur in the process, magi were definitely not concerned about it. The reason why the magi community was classified as an evil faction was probably related to these cruel and terrifying actions. Based on what Grimm had seen and heard in the spiritual illusion, all items that had the word origin substance attached to them were considered a rank 4 magus resource. Magi below rank 4 simply did not have the wealth or strength to touch them. As for their prices, they were all so high that it made one's skin crawl. Although he had the help of the AI chip, which could shorten the time needed to comprehend the laws of fire by 100-fold, it would still be impossible to succeed without over 1,000 years of accumulation. Hence, if he was lucky enough to advance to rank 4, he would probably have to embark on the bumpy road of searching for fire elemental origin substances. After simply imagining his future, Grimm adjusted his posture on the recliner, allowing the warm and gentle sunlight to shine on his body. His body was filled with a feeling of contentment and laziness. The days of fighting and killing had caused his mind to be in a constant state of tension. Chapter 880. Tixter Region, Ouz City. According to the agreement, Grimm got off the airship at Oz City, which was the closest public wizard city to Molten City. There was no sign of the old Magus and the two young magi on the flying ship. It was possible that they had disembarked while Grimm was meditating. Grimm scanned the airship with his immense power of the will, and he could see everything that was happening inside. Even those magi who did not activate their defensive force fields would not be able to escape his all-pervasive spiritual senses. Ordinary Grade 1 wizards knew nothing about his mental perception. Only Grade 2 wizards with sharp mental perception could vaguely sense that something was wrong, but they could not pinpoint the source of the power of the will. The supervising wizard in charge of the airship might have sensed something, but he was afraid of the might of a Tier 3 wizard. As long as Grimm didn't do anything overboard, he wouldn't dare to do anything. Along the gangplank, Grimm slowly got off the airship along with the crowd. A majestic wizard city appeared in front of him. The scattered towers in the center of the continent were made up of 31 different regions. The smaller ones were 700,000 to 800,000 square kilometers, while the bigger ones were a few million square kilometers. They were vast, rich in resources, and had a population of more than 60% of the entire wizard continent. Under such circumstances, almost every region was a brand new world. Although the rulers of these regions were still humans, they were vastly different from other regions in terms of race, skin color, language, and culture. However, under the rule and management of the wizards, the wizard language, which was based on the Silent language, became the official language of the entire continent. Ordinary people naturally did not have the qualifications and energy to learn this strange language. Only the nobles could learn the wizard language from a young age and raise their children to be outstanding talents immersed in the wizard civilization. Of course, if a child from an ordinary family was found to have the talent to become a wizard, the family would immediately change. The local nobles would fight to sponsor the child to go to a wizard tower or a wizard academy to study. If the other party was lucky enough to become a high and mighty wizard, as long as they returned a little goodwill, it would be a great opportunity for the local nobles to rise. It was precisely because of the existence of such a situation that when a talented sorcerer apprentice appeared in a certain place, the local nobles, big or small, would not hesitate to start a bloody war just to get this sorcerer apprentice into their hands. Those powerful and influential nobles would send their children to the Wizard Academy when they were still young. If he had the talent, he would stay there to further his studies. If he didn't have the talent to become a wizard, he would try his best to make friends with apprentices and find suitable targets for his family to invest in. The high and mighty magi community and the large aristocratic system were closely combined, forming a unique landscape in each region. As soon as Grimm got off the airship, a luxurious silver carriage stopped in front of him. A Tier 2 sorcerer wearing a black robe stepped out of the car. On his chest was a magnificent badge with red patterns on a black background. Looking at the emblem, it was the emblem of Molten Fire City that had invited him here. "You must be Lord Flame? Lord Kirik has already instructed me to wait for you here for 3 days. If you don't have any other matters, Lord Kirik hopes that you can reach Molten Fire City as soon as possible." Grimm raised his head and glanced at OS City not far away. He could only regretfully bid farewell to the other party in his heart. "I don't have any other matters. Let's go." As the two of them boarded the silver carriage, the wheels squeaked as it drove out of the airship docking area. It turned into a gray carriageway and galloped towards a certain direction in the northeast under the escort of a team of 100 exotic beast cavalrymen. Grimm quickly scanned the group of exotic beast riders before getting on the carriage. With his all-pervasive spiritual force scanning, the basic data of the other party quickly appeared in his mind. Lizard Cavalry, a modified exotic beast unit. Their overall strength was mid-grade 1. They were made up of cave lizards and human knights. These lizard cavalry were thin and weak. Although they were protected by exquisite chain armor, it was not suitable for a swift and violent charge on land. However, the cave lizards they were riding on had pads on their feet that could form tiny suction cups. Not only could they land soundlessly, but they could also climb over most obstacles. They were especially suitable for running in narrow and rugged areas. These lizard cavalry were holding specially made spears with sharp teeth. The handles were only 3 feet long, but the spear blades were 6 feet long. The spear blades were covered with barbs, and there was a foot-long blood groove at the tip, faintly flashing with a cold blue light. Whether it was the knight's chain armor or the weapons in their hands, they were obviously enchanted weapons. Even wizards would not be able to use them. From their uniform armor and weapons, it could be seen that this molten fire city had quite a bit of influence in the area. Otherwise, it would be difficult to support such a large-scale modification of exotic beasts. As for the Grade 2 wizard who was in charge of welcoming them, not only did he not show any stiff or sluggish expression when facing Grimm, a Grade 3 wizard, up close, he even conversed with him in a very good manner. Through his introduction, Grimm gained a deeper understanding of this strange wizard organization called Molten Fire City. The headquarters of Molten Fire City was located in a huge chain of volcanoes in the northeast of the Tixtet region. Like the Crimson family, it was a large force that ruled over almost the entire Tixtet region. The city lord of Molten Fire City was a Grade 4 wizard, and he had 3 deputy city lords with Grade 3 strength. As for the contract wizards and hired wizards who made a living in Molten Fire City, there were more than 200 to 300 of them. In terms of scale, this organization called Molten Fire City was far superior to the Crimson family. The Tixtet region they ruled over was considered one of the larger regions in terms of area and resources, even in the Scattered Towers forest. As for the Alobes region occupied by the Crimson family, it was a small region at the edge of the Scattered Towers forest. It could not be compared to the mature Tixtet region in all aspects. With such a clear understanding, Grimm could not help but sigh in his heart. In the past wizard wars, the few forces that the Crimson family had devoured were all small forces. Even the Kamara family could barely be considered a medium force. Indeed, Grimm was proud of himself for defeating such an opponent. However, as soon as he stepped out of his family's territory, the huge gap between him and the other veteran forces made him feel a sense of crisis. The Crimson family still had to work hard to develop Molten Fire City. After 5 days of continuous travel, Grimm and his group finally arrived at the edge of the huge chain of volcanoes. Normal carriages were unable to pass through here, so the Grade 2 Magus invited Grimm to ride on his cave lizard and entered a semi-man-made underground cave. Compared to the dark crypt that Grimm had been to before, this place was obviously more developed. Although there were caves of various sizes along the way, and the stalagmites and pillars that hindered the way had been destroyed or removed, the rugged and uneven terrain still made it difficult for normal people to pass through. Only the cave lizards, which were native creatures, could rely on their strange instincts to pass through here without any problems. In some particularly rugged areas, the cave lizards could even run along the walls or ceilings. This was one of the main reasons why Molten Fire City had tamed and modified the cave lizards on a large scale. From the moment they entered the underground cave, Grimm could feel the rapid rise in temperature. Through the cracks and valleys that were everywhere, Grimm could even smell the pungent smell of sulfuric flames. However, as a fire wizard, Grimm did not feel the slightest bit of disgust towards the harsh environment. Instead, he felt an instinctive sense of joy and excitement. The originally dark underground had been modified by Molten Fire City. They had installed many fluorescent stones along the way, causing the entire cave to be illuminated in a dark red. There were almost no signs of subterranean creatures. This was understandable. Since this path was the main entrance to Molten Fire City, they would naturally send magi or acolytes to deal with the subterranean creatures that accidentally entered. As long as they did not allow the subterranean creatures to set up their nests, there would be no signs of large-scale subterranean creatures nearby. After traversing through this winding and bumpy underground passage for 2 days, Grimm and the rest finally arrived at Molten Fire City. Of course, Molten Fire City had also set up 4 to 5 small strongholds along the way. Looking at the number of people resting there, it was no less than an ordinary human village on the surface. Along the way, Grimm and his party had encountered more than 30 or 40 caravans. Wooden chests and parcels of various sizes were filled with Molten Fire City's local products. The contents included animal furs, herbs, strange ores, and large amounts of metals. It was a pity that there was no Kellis or that Grimm needed. Grimm was not surprised by this at all. The value of Kellis obviously exceeded that of ordinary magic gems. Even if they needed to be transported out to be sold, Molten Fire City would not hire such a simple group to do it. Therefore, the caravans that he saw were only buying and selling secondary derivatives produced from the excavation of underground mineral veins. The truly valuable eternal gold and Kellis were definitely in the hands of Molten Fire City, while the trash that came with it became delicious cakes that the nearby human organizations fought over. Chapter 881. In fact, Molten Fire City was a huge underground city that was opened up in the belly of a volcano. The core building of the city was, of course, a powerful wizard tower. But unlike the others, this wizard's pagoda was not built on a stable volcanic rock. Instead, it was built on a region of flowing lava. The wizard's tower would only be revealed at a fixed time every year as the sea of lava receded. For the rest of the time, the wizard tower was hidden in a tumbling sea of hot lava, and the traffic inside and outside was cut off. The wizard's tower became the secluded residence of the level 4 master of Molten City. As for the other wizards of Molten City, including a few deputy city masters, they all lived in the underground tunnels around the wizard's tower. The volcanoes that rose and fell continuously, the winding and complicated underground maze, and the numerous modified shaman beasts caused this underground world to seem to not be desolate, and the aura of life could be sensed everywhere. The entire Molten City was divided into 3 levels. The inner core was the Wizard District. Due to the high concentration and activity of fire elements, normal humans could not survive here for long. Therefore, only wizards could enter and live here normally. The outer core was the Apprentice District. Thanks to the isolation of the energy barrier, the energy radiation here was much lower than in the core area. That was why most of the apprentices lived here. Whether it was for research or daily activities, the main activity area of the wizard apprentices was around the outer ring of the core area. On the outskirts of the apprentice area, there were some small living areas that were similar to villages or supply points. There were many ordinary people who provided various services to the apprentices. There was no lack of taverns, inns, mercenary camps, underground black markets, and other special places. The waitresses in the taverns often sold sex on the side. However, these outposts provided a large number of fearless miners for Molten City. One of the main reasons why the level 4 wizard had chosen to build the wizard's pagoda here was because there was a large metal vein deep within the volcano. The magical metals stored in the vein were of excellent quality, and the amount was astonishing. It became the biggest source of income for the Molten City. The mineral deposits required a large amount of manpower to excavate them. That was why Molten City had spared no effort to build a massive underground city here, all for the astonishing reserves of magical metal veins beneath their feet. Every day, thousands of miners of various races worked hard in the complex underground mines, fighting for the strength of Molten Fire City with their lives. Therefore, the more Grimm learned about the Molten Fire City, the more emotional he felt. In terms of population, the scale of the city, and the amount of resources traded, this Molten Fire City was clearly 100 times stronger than the Crimson family's Blazing Flame Monarch Wizard's Pagoda. But even though he was envious, Grimm didn't dare to dream of occupying or owning such an area. In the sorcerer world, almost all of the high-grade resources had already been divided up by the large forces or high-grade sorcerers. Even if such a high-grade resource fell into his hands, it wouldn't bring him a huge amount of magic crystals, but an endless war between magi. without sufficient strength to intimidate the enemy. It would be easy for Tier 4 sorcerers to covet these resources if they were exposed. The Crimson family did not have any Tier 4 sorcerers. Not only was it not a blessing for such a resource to fall into his hands, it might even cause the destruction of the entire family. Some time ago, there had been a few sorcerer wars against the Crimson family. On the surface, it seemed like a conflict between families, but the root of the problem was the lance plane that the Crimson family controlled. A decent dragon plane with an inexhaustible supply of dragon tokens. This was obviously not something a rising family could have. Hence, the wealth of the Crimson family attracted the attacks of many small and medium-sized families, like hungry wolves. If not for the Crimson family's solid foundation, the rising family that Grimm had created would have already become food for others. When that happened, Grimm would lose the protection of his family and be alone. He would have to hand over the Lance Plains World Waymark and be labeled as a failure, becoming the laughingstock of all sorcerers. Filled with endless fantasies, Grimm was led through the outskirts of the base, past the apprentices area, and finally arrived in front of an underground cave. Here, a dark red membrane of light blocked the way forward. The lizard cavalry reined in their mounts and stood guard at the sides respectfully. Only Grimm swaggered into the barrier under the guidance of the Tier 2 sorcerer. It was as if he had passed through a transparent barrier of water, and he did not feel any obstruction. But at the same time, Grimm also sensed 4 to 5 detection waves of different functions scanning his body stealthily. Unfortunately, they were all blocked by the transparent flames around Grimm's body. As if he had received a message from a spell in the distance, the black-robed sorcerer smiled and bowed. "Lord Flame, please follow me. Lord Kirik is already waiting for you." The meeting place was a gray underground hall. A Tier 3 sorcerer and 2 Tier 2 sorcerers were already waiting here. When they saw Grimm arrive, smiles appeared on their faces. The Tier 3 Lord Kirik looked exactly the same as he did in the mental illusion. He was tall and skinny, with a dark green gem embedded in the middle of his forehead. He was very enthusiastic about Grimm's arrival. "You must be the legendary fire shaman tribe leader of the Alobis region, right? It's an honor to meet you, Sir Grimm." Kirik had a smile on his face as he nodded to Grimm. The other 2 Tier 2 sorcerers were a man and a woman. Both of them were quite young, and they stood behind Kirik, secretly sizing up Grimm. Those who were able to become high-grade sorcerers were all people with outstanding talent and luck. However, to be able to reach rank 3 before the age of 200 meant that his talent was a little too monstrous. Hence, when the 2 Tier 2 sorcerers from Molten City suddenly saw this legendary fire shaman, they could not help but feel a little excited. When she saw Grimm's handsome appearance and sturdy body, the young female sorcerer's eyes sparkled, and a smile appeared on her face. Grimm wasn't surprised that the other party was able to find out his identity. He had already done some research before coming here. Molten City was a well-known force in the central part of the continent, and it was a very powerful organization. This could be easily understood from the fact that they could occupy a large area all by themselves. On top of that, the Tixtet region where Molten City was located was too far away from the Crimson family. It was impossible for them to have any conflicts of interest, let alone any hidden conflicts. Therefore, Grimm did not have to worry about his safety here. Therefore, Grimm was not surprised or panicked at all when the other party exposed his identity. "It's my honor to visit Molten City. Everything here is so amazing. It's not a fluke that your organization could occupy the Tixtet region alone." "Haha, Lord Grimm, you're too kind." Wizard Kirik chuckled and changed the topic. "Our Molten City has invited 2 wizards for a mission. The other one will arrive in about 2 days, so I'll have to trouble you to stay here for 2 days. In my opinion, I'll let Wizard Frina accompany you for the next 2 days." The female wizard standing behind Wizard Kirik took a step forward and said with a smile, "Lord Grimm, why don't I show you around first?" This Wizard Frina had a beautiful appearance and a sexy body. The white robe she was wearing made her look even more beautiful, with a slim waist and long legs. However, when Grimm glanced at her, he sensed a faint energy radiation from her face and body. It seemed like her appearance and body had been modified with a spell. This kind of situation was very common among most low-ranking wizards. After all, a witch's beauty was also a resource that could be used. However, this kind of situation was very rare among high-ranking wizards. This was because high-grade witches were all strong-willed and strong-willed people. In many aspects, they were even stronger than wizards. How could they be willing to do such a shameful thing like exchanging their bodies for resources? Thank you. Grimm smiled faintly and followed him out of the stone hall. After Grimm and Freena's footsteps disappeared into the depths of the tunnel, the other rank 2 wizard asked, "Lord Kirik, what should we do about the mines? If this Lord Grimm wants to enter the mines with the excuse of a mission, should we stop him?" The tall and skinny wizard Kirik lowered his head and muttered, "This Grimm is here for the Kelesor, so you must keep an eye on mines 2 and 3. If necessary, he can freely enter mine 4, but don't let him get close to mines 2 and 3. By the way, has the flaming tiger come to cause trouble these days? Last month, it was injured by Lord Dorian with the help of a spell circle. It hasn't invaded the mines since. However, in the past 2 days, there have been signs of its activity around mine 2. I suspect it is planning something again. Send more people. We must not give it a chance to break in. The last time it caused a ruckus in mine 3, many miners were injured or killed. It has seriously affected the production of the Eternal Gold Mine. Yes, I will arrange it personally. All right, make sure everything is arranged properly. Don't let anything go wrong. Also, the other sealing master that we invited will be here soon. Once everyone is here, we will immediately capture and kill the flaming tiger. Before that, you must also find a way to track the flaming tiger's movements. It would be best if you can find out where its nest is. The rank 2 wizard's face showed a trace of difficulty, but he immediately gritted his teeth and said, "I will do it." Chapter 882. Over the next 2 days, Grimm, accompanied by the beautiful Freena, toured almost all of the public areas of Molten City. Molten City was not small. If it was on the surface, it would be at least the size of a medium-sized city. However, the population of the entire underground Molten City did not exceed 3,000 to 4,000 people. 70% of the workers and servants lived in the outskirts of the stronghold. The core area, which could support 20,000 to 30,000 people, only had 200 to 300 magi. Most of the magi were either in the library or in their laboratories. The few who went out were in a hurry. As a result, even though there were so many botanical gardens, and other man-made landscapes in the huge core area, there was not a single person to be seen. Grimm could see that Freena was drooling over him. If he beckoned with his finger, this beautiful magus would come to his bed in the middle of the night. However, Grimm had something on his mind and was not in the mood to play games with her. Over the next 2 days, the resentment in Freena's eyes was obvious. Grimm was not in the mood to care about this. The more he learned, the stranger he felt. This time, it was very likely that his enemy was someone he knew. When he found out from Freena that the one causing trouble in Molten City was a grade 3 flame tiger, his heart began to beat faster. When he saw the magical image Freena pulled out from the surveillance crystal, he was even more certain that it was the grade 3 flame tiger Sindar that had snuck over from the fire elemental plane. Speaking of which, Molten City had suffered an unexpected calamity. In order to prevent enemies from invading, they had set up a large number of wizard formations and magi on the outskirts of the mine. Above the mine was the wizard's pagoda guarded by the grade 4 wizard. Under this kind of protection, it was impossible for any external enemy to invade. But what the people of Molten City didn't expect was that the enemy didn't come from above, but from the depths of the lava sea where the mine was located. 2 years ago, a Class 3 flaming tiger with extremely high intelligence emerged from the underground lava sea. In one breath, it invaded many underground mines. Not only did it devour a large amount of exotic ores, it even caused the lava sea to pour into the mines, killing more than 600 Molten Fire City miners in one breath. From then on, this rank 3 flaming tiger seemed to have the intention to settle down in Molten Fire City. Usually, it would hide in the depths of the lava sea and sneak into the underground mines whenever it was free. Over and over again, the output of Molten Fire City's metal ores plummeted, and the recruited miners also suffered heavy casualties. As the managers of the mine, the Magi of Molten City naturally would not sit by and watch a strange beast wreak havoc in their family's territory. They had also formed teams to encircle and annihilate the Flaming Tiger a few times. Unfortunately, the Flaming Tiger would always escape using the ever-present lava sea. If the number of Magi they sent out was too little, or if their strength was not enough, they might be bitten by the Flaming Tiger instead. The number of sorcerers that were sent out increased, and the Flame Tiger was very cunning. It turned around and disappeared into the depths of the lava sea. Although there were a few fire magi in Molten Fire City, they were only at the level of 2. Searching for the Flaming Tiger in the lava sea was like throwing a meat bun at a dog. The rest of the magi used spell formations to isolate themselves from the boiling lava and were barely able to fight. However, if they were to venture deep into the lava sea, they would not be able to return. Therefore, the Magi of Molten City had all put down their work and guarded the vicinity of the underground mine. They were in a terrible state and were suffering unspeakable hardships. They had no choice but to issue a high-grade mission, hoping to recruit a powerful fire magus to kill the Flaming Tiger. Of course, worried that a single fire magus would have a hard time dealing with the Flaming Tiger alone, Molten Fire City also recruited a level 3 sealer. A level 3 fire magus, a level 3 sealer, and a level 3 magus from Molten Fire City. With this kind of strength, it should be more than enough to kill the Flaming Tiger. After understanding all of this, Grimm could not help but ask Freya to take a look at the vicinity of the underground mine. Freya hesitated for a moment, then used a spell to ask Lord Kirik for permission. Only then did she bring Grimm to the underground tunnel. After walking through the winding underground tunnel for half an hour, Grimm could clearly feel the density of the fire elemental energy in the tunnel increasing rapidly. The smell of sulfur in the air was also becoming stronger. In a spacious underground hall, Grimm finally saw a group of people that he had not seen in a long time. This was a place that one had to pass to reach the underground mine. The spacious underground stone hall was crowded with non-humankind slaves who were wearing shackles and had their upper bodies naked, with only a piece of ragged cloth covering their lower bodies. They were all well-built and had tan skin. Their naked upper bodies were covered with grease, stains, and crisscrossed whip marks. Although they were tall and mighty, their eyes were filled with numbness and patience. There was a long queue of people waiting to receive their tools to enter the tunnel. On the other side, there was a group of slaves of different races that had just come out of the mine. Each of them carried a wooden basket that was almost as tall as themselves, which was piled high with black ores. The surface of the ores reflected the fluorescent light from the walls of the cave, creating a colorful scene that was very beautiful. These were all extremely crude ores. Although the ores contained quite a lot of metals, without further grinding and filtering, it would be very difficult to distinguish which metals were more abundant. The people in charge of inspecting, weighing, and recording were all acolytes. Beside them were large groups of human mercenaries who were in charge of maintaining order in the underground hall. As for the 2 magi stationed here, they were lying on wooden chairs at the side of the hall, drinking tea and discussing something with animated expressions on their faces. Naturally, the miners, slaves, and subordinate mercenaries used another passage to enter and exit. On the other hand, Freya brought Grimm to the upper passageway that only Magi could use. Seeing Freya's arrival, the 2 Grade 1 Magi quickly stood up and bowed to greet her. Did that strange beast come to cause trouble in the past few days? Although Freya was like a little bird in front of Grimm, she was very dignified in front of these low-ranked Magi. No? Then open the tunnel. I want to go take a look at the lava sea with this lord. Yes. With Freya leading the way, the 2 Magi naturally had no objections. Under their guidance, Grim and Freya entered a small, cold path. After a few turns, they arrived in front of a stone wall that was as smooth as a mirror. The two magi each took out a strange magic wand and pointed it at the center of the stone wall. Following a strange wave of magic, a huge stone door appeared in the center of the originally greenish-gray stone wall. Then, the stone door silently slid to one side, revealing the dark red, viscous magma flowing outside the light film. As soon as the door opened, an energy barrier rose up and blocked the boiling magma outside. Even so, the temperature in the tunnel began to rise rapidly, quickly reaching 100 degrees. If an ordinary person were to be placed in such an environment, their flesh and blood would probably be cooked within a few seconds. Even the two magi stationed here could not help but wipe the sweat off their foreheads. Grim scanned the area, and Chip scanned the stone door as well as the dark red magma sea that filled his vision. The environment in the lava sea is rather complicated. Let me accompany you for a walk, Freya said with a smile. Grim shook his head and said indifferently, I won't go far. I'll just stay nearby and scout the environment. This way, I'll have more confidence in the battle later. After saying that, he didn't bother to exchange pleasantries with the other party. He took a few steps towards the light membrane, and a layer of light red magic light suddenly rose from his body. Only then did he slowly pass through the light membrane and submerge into the surging sea of lava. Although the magma sea before him seemed to be motionless, the viscous magma was constantly surging. It was just that the entire space was filled with boiling, dark red magma, which gave people an illusion of the senses. The moment Grim passed through the barrier suddenly felt a crushing force of over 1,000 kilograms. The boiling magma that corroded his bones and flesh was squeezed towards the center from all directions. Being in the middle, Grim naturally had to endure this strange force. Grim hesitated for a moment before slowly withdrawing the barrier into his body. The boiling magma in the surroundings squeezed over and tightly wrapped around him. When the boiling magma came into contact with his warm skin, there was no sizzling sound. Instead, waves of heat flowed into Grim's body, making him feel so comfortable that he almost moaned. If he was still at rank 2, he might be able to withstand the extreme heat, but he would not be able to withstand the terrifying pressure. Now that he had advanced to rank 3, his body's affinity with the fire elemental essence had reached an extremely high level. Now that he was in the lava sea, not only did he not feel any pressure, he felt as if he was a fish in water. However, Grim had to divide a portion of the fire energy from his body and spread it around him to protect his magus robes. While he might be able to withstand the terrifying heat, his clothes would not. If he did not want to run around naked, he could only use the fire energy to protect his clothes. Other magi might find it difficult to pass through the lava sea, but a fire magus would not have such a problem. Grim chuckled, and his entire body immediately turned invisible. He turned into a humanoid flame that quickly traversed through the sticky magma sea. Relying on the different angles of the flames, Grim darted left and right in the depths of the lava sea. His speed was several times faster than when he was flying in the air. Chapter 883. Grim only stayed in the lava for 2 hours before returning to the underground tunnel. Moreover, it could be seen that these 2 hours of probing did not consume too much of his energy. Freyna, who was accompanying him, expressed her heartfelt admiration for him. With her strength as a rank 2 magus, she could barely hold on in the lava for 15 minutes. The rank 3 magi in Molten Fire City could hold on for a little longer, but they could only barely survive. If they were to encounter the rank 3 Flaming Tiger, they would not be able to display even a tenth of their strength in the lava sea. Low-grade fire resistance potions were fine for normal fire environments, but when faced with a lava that was as deep as the sea and the ferocious and cunning rank 3 Flaming Tiger, they were clearly not enough. If not for that, the powerful Molten Fire City would not have exposed themselves and asked for help from the outside world. Hence, Freyna was happy to see Grimm, who was like a fish in water, handling the lava with ease. I have a basic understanding of the environment here. Let's go back. Grimm's expression was relaxed, and even the Magi from Molten Fire City smiled. The two guarding Magi quickly waved their specially made magic wands and sealed the entrance. When Grimm was about to leave with Freyna, he turned around and glanced at the stone door that was slowly closing, a meaningful smile appearing on his face. Deep within the lava sea, the roiling lava was as viscous as jelly. Even if regular Magi were immune to fire, it would still be extremely difficult for them to move through it. Therefore, true fire creatures all had their own unique movement method. After Grimm left, the lava sea regained its calm and flowed in accordance with the rhythm that had been established for a long time. Although it was not as fast and ferocious as the rivers on the surface, it was still majestic and unstoppable. However, in the midst of the surging magma, a strange red gem was also rolling and floating along with the waves. When it reached a certain singularity, the surface of the gem, which was covered in strange and complicated patterns, suddenly lit up with a red glow. This of red light was so inconspicuous in the dark red sea of lava, but quickly dyed the entire gem. The elemental gem madly absorbed the dense fire elemental energy in the surroundings and quickly formed a 2-meter-tall, flaming human figure. When large amounts of fire elemental energy entered the flaming human figure, a new Grimm was born in the depths of the lava sea. This was a new fire spell that used the core of a magic puppet as a base. It was mixed with a part of the soul attachment spell and projection spell, and it also copied some of the basic functions of the AI chip. Making use of the surging elemental vibrations in the lava sea, the fire clone dodged the runic spell formation near the underground tunnel. Once it was formed, it quickly moved, continuously moving towards the depths of the lava sea. Due to the immaturity of the technique, this fire doppelganger only had the strength of a grade 2 beginner. It might not be suitable to be used as a fighter, but it was more than enough to be used as a spy and messenger. As a pure fire creature, the flaming clone was only grade 2, but it could move freely in the lava sea. As it moved towards the depths of the lava sea, it used the elemental language unique to fire creatures to transmit a voice in all directions. Sindar, Sindar, Sindar. The voice was not loud or surging, but could be transmitted very far with the help of the omnipresent fire elemental energy, until this strange sound was captured by a certain strange existence. It was a lava boulder the size of a small hill. The soft and fragile soil and rocks on the surface had been completely eroded by the lava sea. What was left was a huge metal ore that even the high temperature of the lava sea could not withstand. Looking from afar, the surface of the lava boulder was full of bumps and hollows, and its surface was densely covered with strange metals that shone brightly. It was the existence of these strange metals that prevented the erosion of the lava sea and allowed the lava boulder to survive in this terrifying environment. At this moment, a 3-meter-long flaming tiger, wrapped in violent flames, was lying in a small nest dug out from the center of the lava boulder, sleeping soundly with its eyes closed. Beside it, the small cave was filled with metal ores of various shapes and sizes, as well as a large number of magical gems. Through the translucent body of the flaming tiger, one could vaguely see a purplish-red metal or hoarding in its abdomen, wrapped in a crimson flame. Every time a layer of molten metal was eroded, the flaming tiger would immediately absorb it into its body. If Grimm was here, he would definitely be surprised to find that as the purplish gold slowly entered the flaming tiger's body, the aura of the flaming tiger's body gradually became stronger. However, this increase in aura was extremely slow. Without the scanning ability of the AI chip in Grimm's brain, he would not have been able to detect it. Although this increase in strength was slow, it was real. If this flaming tiger was given enough time and enough purplish gold, or it might really be able to use this method to push its strength to the peak of grade 3. This was already very shocking. In the past 2 years, ever since it discovered that there was eternium ore in the metal vein that it needed, Sindar the flaming tiger had been entrenched in the area, unwilling to leave. From time to time, it would run to the human stronghold to plunder some things it needed. Unfortunately, eternium ore was also something that the humans needed more. After a few times, although it had plundered a lot of metal ores, the eternium ore that Sindar urgently needed was very little. Left with no choice, Sindar could only open up a hidden nest near the human stronghold and play guerrilla warfare with the human magi. However, today, just as Sindar was slowly and contentedly absorbing the eternium ore, a strange elemental ripple swept through its elemental body. Sindar! Sindar! Sindar stood up abruptly, an expression of disbelief appearing on its flaming tiger face. Why? Why did it feel like someone was calling its name outside? Could it be a trick of the human magi? But how did its name leak out? Could it be that the harsh environment of the lava sea could not hinder the prophecy of a human magi? Even though it was bewildered, Sindar no longer had the mood to stay here. With a surge of flames, Sindar the flaming tiger had already silently snuck out of the nest, taking a roundabout route in the direction of the strange elemental ripple. This feeling, why did it feel so familiar? Inside the lava sea, Grimm's flaming doppelganger was moving quickly while constantly vibrating the lava, embedding the message it wanted to convey into it, letting it slowly spread in the vast lava sea. An hour had passed, but there was still no result. Oh, could it be that the flaming tiger was hiding somewhere further away? The flaming doppelganger frowned slightly and turned around, intending to find another place to continue the broadcast. However, just as the flaming doppelganger turned around, it was surprised to find a tall flaming tiger made of pure raging flames sitting majestically behind it, using a pair of strange eyes made of golden flames to size it up curiously. The distance between the two was so close that they could hear each other. The sulfuric flames coming out of the flaming tiger's huge nose could almost ignite the flaming doppelganger's skin. "Do we know each other?" Sindar the flaming tiger asked curiously. It was really, really curious. The flaming figure in front of it felt vaguely familiar, but the opponent's method of forming solid bodies was very clever. If it did not smash the flaming figure's body, it would be very difficult to detect the spiritual waves hidden within. It seemed that it only knew one Magus in the Magus world. But that guy was only a grade 2. It was impossible for him to form a doppelganger and come so far to find it. Just as Sindar the flaming tiger was feeling bewildered, the blurry face of the flaming doppelganger suddenly shook, and Grimm's appearance condensed. "Sindar, we've only been apart for a few days, and you already don't recognize me? It's really you." Sindar was stunned at first, then raised its nose to the side of the flaming doppelganger and took a deep breath, then said in shock, "You've advanced? It's all thanks to you, Sindar, that I gained a lot in the fire elemental plane. I've only advanced to grade 3 a few years ago." "You won your gains with your own abilities? Don't blame me." Sindar's golden eyes suddenly lit up. "Did the Magus in the stronghold invite you here?" "That's right." "Then what are you going to do? Help them deal with me?" At this point, Sindar the flaming tiger put on a fierce expression. "If I wanted to deal with you, do you think I would have sent this doppelganger here?" Grimm's face that was condensed from flames showed an annoyed expression. Although this flaming tiger was intelligent and cunning, its personality was no different from other elemental creatures. It was not as cunning as human magi. "Then why are you here this time?" Sindar could not help but be confused. "Before we negotiate, I think it's better for us to understand each other's needs." "Lord Sindar, why have you stayed here for so long?" Sindar hesitated for a moment. It did not feel any malice from Grimm, so it hesitated for a moment before speaking the truth. "I need the eternium ore here." Hearing this answer, Grimm's face immediately revealed a charming smile. "Good. Very good. What's good? Our interests are not in conflict, because what I need is the Kellis or flaming tiger probed. You mean we can work together? Chapter 884. Within Molten Fire City, a small welcoming banquet was being held in full swing. Grim and the sealer who had just arrived were undoubtedly the main characters of the banquet, and they were warmly welcomed by the higher-ups of Molten Fire City. Unlike previous banquets, this welcoming banquet was held in a large stone hall. Most of the participants were rank 2 and 3 magi. The 3 vice city lords of Molten Fire City had all revealed themselves, but one of them was a projection spell. Kalak, male, rank 3, elemental magus venom. He was tall and skinny, with a dark green gem embedded in the middle of his forehead. Linus, male, rank 3, body tempering magus. He was a tall and sturdy bald man with a large golden sword on his back. Dorian, male, rank 3, magic circle master. He had a gloomy expression, and his exposed body was engraved with strange, brightly colored runes. It was obvious that Magus Linus was not in Molten Fire City. He had only used a projection spell to create a body to attend this banquet. As for the rank 3 sealer who had rushed over from the southern region of Elathia, she was a middle-aged female magus with a gloomy expression. She had triangular eyes and a bulbous nose. Her entire appearance was unsightly. This was especially surprising to Grim. After all, with the methods of magi, whether it was organ transplants or regrown limbs, they were not troublesome matters. Changing one's physique and appearance was a piece of cake. It was as easy as reaching out one's hand. As such, none of the male or female magi that Grim had seen so far had particularly ugly appearances. Only those whose bodies had been severely contaminated by spells, and their souls had been damaged, would have an appearance that was unacceptable to others. However, Grim did not sense any artificial modifications on this rank 3 sealer. This also meant that her current appearance was her original appearance. However, Grim did not have any prejudice towards this. After all, there were too many unconventional people among magi. The more unconventional a person was, the more frightening they would be. This meant that all the success she had achieved so far was due to her own hard work and strength. There are no tricks involved. Asterisk clap, clap, clap. Asterisk Wizard Kalak clapped his hands a few times, and all the wizards in the banquet hall stopped talking and focused their attention on him. Today, we have the honor of inviting the legendary Wizard Grim from the Alobes region and the powerful Wizard Unide from the Elathia region. Let us give them a warm round of applause. Thunderous applause immediately rang out in the hall. Grim took a step forward with a smile on his face. He looked around, raised the cup in his hand, and drained it in one gulp before returning to his original position. There was not the slightest smile on the face of Witch Unit. She raised her glass and touched it to her lips, which was considered a greeting. Inside the hall, Molten City's Tier 2 magi numbered around 30 as well. Every one of them wore astonished expressions as they observed the 2 Tier 3 magi from afar. Their gazes lingered on the legendary fire wizard Grim for the longest time. Although the Alobes region was hundreds of thousands of kilometers away from Molten City, almost everyone present had heard of the rumor that a Tier 2 Magus had killed a Tier 3 Magus in the arena. To put it bluntly, at this moment, the name of this legendary rank 3 fire wizard was even more popular than some Tier 4 magi. It was even more shocking. Now that this fellow had advanced to the 3rd order, how strong would he be now? To be honest, many of the magi present were very curious and could not wait to find out. However, in a situation like this, no one dared to ask him directly. They could only suppress their curiosity and wait for the results to be revealed in the future. High-ranked magi gatherings were much simpler and more direct than low-ranked magi gatherings. After the simple introductions and exchanges, everyone could go about their own business. Some magi who were worried about their own experiments or had specific duties in Molten City left quietly. Under Wizard Kirik's invitation, Grim and Unid turned around and went to another secret room that was even quieter and more secluded. Here, Wizard Dorian gave them a detailed and comprehensive introduction of the Flaming Tiger. When Wizard Dorian finished his report, Wizard Kellic couldn't help but turn his face to Grim. Lord Grim, you've already stepped on the lava sea yesterday. Do you think it's suitable to be our battlefield? Grim's eyes couldn't help but slightly squint. After thinking for a moment, he gently shook his head. The lava sea that Wizard Freya brought me to had a temperature of more than 3,400 degrees, and the pressure of the magma was as high as 212 degrees. I might not have any problems moving around in there, but if it was someone else, even a few of you here, I'm afraid they wouldn't even last an hour. After hearing Grim's words, the three Vice City Lords of Molten City exchanged glances. After we reached an agreement with the two of you, we came up with a hunting plan, Kellic said slowly. Oh, why don't you say it? Yunid's sharp voice sounded. We plan on setting up a trap near the underground mine to lure the flaming tiger into an ambush. Once it falls into an ambush, Lord Dorian will be able to use the runic Magus array buried in the mine to instantly disperse all the flames within a radius of a kilometer. At that time, Ms. Yunid can take the opportunity to seal it. Then what should I do? Grim asked with a frown. Of course, you need to hide in the lava sea first. Once the flame tiger falls into an ambush, we will be responsible for killing it. You need to block its escape route and not let it escape into the lava sea. Grim's brows furrowed again. As the person in charge, he arranged for the few of them to be together so they could look after each other. Yunid would also hide in the dark and only appear when the flame tiger had nowhere to run. This way, it seemed like all the risks were on his head. Once the flame tiger fell into an ambush, it would definitely try its best to escape into the lava sea, blocking the flame tiger's path. What a good mission. Grim stroked his chin and chuckled coldly, his face full of dissatisfaction. Lord Grim, if the mission is successful, we can add an additional 100 kilograms of Kellis or to your mission reward. 100 kilograms of Kellis, or? If it was refined into Kellis alloy, it might not even be enough to create half a space furnace, not to mention the costly magic furnace. Grim finally stopped smiling and said with a straight face, Lord Kellic, that's a grade 3 flame tiger we're talking about. If we force it into a dead end, I'm afraid I won't be able to handle it alone. If it escapes, I won't be able to bear the consequences. Kellic's expression turned awkward. His lips moved slightly, and after discussing with the other two deputy city lords, he turned back to Grim. How about this? Molten City will send you 2 more grade 2 fire wizards and have them listen to your orders. If it's successful, we're willing to pay 170 kilograms of Kellis, or... At this point, Grim knew that this was the other party's bottom line. He could only nod in agreement helplessly. The time will be the day after tomorrow. Lord Dorian will arrange the runic spell formation as soon as possible. Once the trap is set up, we'll act according to the plan and see if that flame tiger will fall for it. In Flame Tiger Sindar's lair. While Molten City was secretly plotting out the details, Lord Kellic would never have guessed that everything that happened in the secret room had already been projected by the fire clone using the soul brand. Sindar lay prone on a pile of metal, or watching the scene in the secret room projected by the fire clone with great interest. He also heard the contents of the Magi's discussion. Although he was full of confidence in his fire abilities, after listening to the arrangements of the human Magi, Sindar's heart was filled with fear. If he didn't know about all this, and was lured into a trap by the other party using the ore as bait, the chances of him escaping from the encirclement of 5 grade 3 Magi was almost 0. These are not 5 cabbages, but 5 grade 3 Magi. To be honest, that talisman formation master alone had already injured Sindar with his strange witchcraft ability. This caused Sindar, who had always looked down on human Magi, to be overwhelmed with shock. He had to admit that human Magi were much weaker than powerful elemental creatures in terms of physique and control over elemental power. However, in terms of battle techniques and sinister methods, they were more than 10 streets ahead of elemental creatures. At this moment, suddenly hearing the other party's sinister plan, even this strange flame tiger, who feared neither the heavens nor the earth, could not help but want to slip away. You heard it too. Those fellows have arranged such a terrifying trap at the mine. I think we should temporarily cancel our plans. I can run to other places and play for a few years. When they lose their patience, I'll run back. Flame Tiger Sindar said hesitantly. Hearing the words of his temporary ally, the fire clone was speechless. However, he had a new understanding of how difficult it was to deal with flame creatures. Indeed, the plan that Sindar thought of was undoubtedly the most convenient and the most speechless. However, it was obviously not in line with Grimm's interests, so he could only reject it. Sindar, don't you believe in my brain? Don't worry, I will definitely come up with a perfect plan to make their plans fail. As for us, we can make a huge profit and escape far away. Grimm could only use his silver tongue to persuade this cunning flame tiger. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.